Welcome to the Young Turks. J.Q. Granik is sparing with you guys. Song of Fire and Ice tonight.
And you know I'm on fire.
Okay, well, never mind. Song of Fire and Fire tonight. So there will be a lot of Dracarys. So the Rashida Tlaib story has me enraged. The first couple of stories has me enraged. The rest of the show has me enraged. So this will be fun. Are there no bounds to Republican lies? The correct answer is no. And so we live in a world where one side has decided they've detached from reality. And so how do you deal with that? And how do you get the mainstream media to absorb that and do their jobs? And that is among the biggest challenges we have in the country. All right, so let's do it.
All right. Healthcare lobbyists are working overtime in an effort to defeat any possibility of Medicare for All becoming a reality. Now, there's one particular group known as Center Forward that is getting together with like-minded individuals to come up with a game plan to defeat Medicare for All. And one of the things that they do, and this is certainly indicative of the healthcare industry overall, is they get some of these congressional staffers together at fancy, ritzy resorts in an effort to wine and dine them and convince them to work against Medicare for All. Now, according to The Intercept, Center Forward's big idea on Medicare Part D, for instance, is to maintain lobbyist-authored provisions of the law that bar the government from bargaining for lower prices for medicine. Such restrictions cost taxpayers and patients as much as $73 billion a year while boosting the profits of drug makers. So to give you an idea of how they push for what they want in terms of continuing the private healthcare industry and continuing the system the way it is, several aides to Democratic leadership filed disclosures showing that they received paid travel to attend the Center Forward retreat, including chiefs of staff to Majority Whip Jim Clyburn and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. So again, this is very similar to what pharmaceutical companies do with some doctors. They'll have some sort of retreat at a fancy resort. The doctors will go, they get wined and dined, and it's likely that they'll get influenced by what the pharmaceutical industry wants. And the same thing is happening here with Center Forward, the private healthcare industry, and these congressional staffers.
So there's more analogies there, but the only thing that I'll disagree with a little bit is that there's not a chance they'll be influenced, it's a guarantee. This is corruption defined. And so they come over and they say, okay, now here's your marching orders and you will do as you're told. The $560 trip to a fancy retreat is tip of the iceberg. That's not the real deal. That's just where they tell them what their job is. Here, we are your donors, you shut up and you do as you are told, but we're telling you in a very nice and pleasant context of a mansion that you've all been invited to, right? No, the real deal is in the money that they contribute to their politicians and the other forms of the lobbying. So Center Forward is just a rebrand for corporate Democrats. They've had a lot of rebrands because they're toxic and nobody likes them. No actual voters like them. There's no voters in America who are like, oh my God, if I could just get a Democrat who loves giant multinational corporations and does favors for them instead of looking out for our voters. That voter does not exist. The only thing that props them up is branding, marketing, and help from television. So everybody on TV are like, oh my God, these centrist Democrats are so reasonable. The way they want to work with Dick Cheney and Mitch McConnell and the oil companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the defense contractors, that is how bipartisanship should work. And there's corruption on that level too. But in this case, I mean, look, we've had what? The Blue Dog Democrats, they were in attendance, if any of them still exist. Almost all of them have lost their elections, again, because they are deeply unpopular in the real world. Problem Solvers Caucus, that means I worked with Mitch McConnell to solve the donor problems, and New Democrats. And those are all corporate Democrats. Now you got center forward. You could call it whatever the hell you like. It's corruption either way. So look, even the progressive presidential candidates, unfortunately, won't call it what it is. And you have to name it. So people love saying that about other issues. I'll say it about this issue. Corruption. So is Steny Hoyer corrupt? Yes, yes. And so Jim Clyburn, yes, he's done some great work in the past in other issues. Is he corrupt in this way? Yes. So the people who have attended, Kurt Schrader, Dan Lipinski, of course. Dan Lipinski is a massively right-wing Democrat. And he's in a very blue district. And he goes over, why is he so right-wing? Part of it is ideological on issues like abortion, and part of it is he gets legally bribed to be that right-wing, and he's that kind of guy who loves taking that legalized bribery. So that's what this story's about. And they're just rubbing your face in it, because they're like, who cares? Come to our mansion, we'll do it right in front of everybody. Well, I'll put you in the room with the Republicans. You guys will all give us everything we want. Then you go run ads pretending you're against us. It'll be a nice little trick, and we'll rob the American people together. It's not a fun trick.
Right, and you mentioned the Blue Dog Democrats, which I'm glad you mentioned, because this is essentially the same group, right? So Blue Dog Democrats fought aggressively against the Affordable Care Act. They fought aggressively and won in defeating any opportunity or chance for a public option as part of the Affordable Care Act. And you're right in that this group has now rebranded itself and they're going with center forward. And you have Democrats and Republicans working together to defeat something that polls incredibly well. In fact, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll asking specifically, do you support a single payer healthcare system, right? So there's no Medicare for all, there's no language like that. Specifically a single payer healthcare system. 56% of voters, this includes Democrats and Republicans, were supportive of a single payer healthcare system, which means that they're working against what the majority of Americans want. And Jake mentioned legalized bribery. And in this case, it is legal because there was a loophole used. So for instance, let's go to graphic 4. The Ethics Committee rules bar registered lobbyists from arranging luxury travel for Congress. Although Center Forward's board is made up almost entirely of registered corporate lobbyists, the event forms were signed by the group's executive director, Corey Kramer, who is not a registered lobbyist, a technicality that helps skirt the prohibition on lobbyist-funded travel. So they use all these loopholes in order to get around ethics rules.
So look, Republicans also attended: Sean Duffy, Rodney Davis, Will Hurd, and these are all the guys that Joe Scarborough and the rest of television celebrate. So my question to you is, bipartisan compromise to what end? And that's a question I'm gonna keep on asking no matter what. To what end? Because they say, well, bipartisanship is great. Really? What if they have a bipartisan agreement to nuke a country? Well, then I would call it not great, right? And you say, well, that's an extreme example. How about if they did a bipartisan agreement to rob the American people of $73 billion? Well, that wouldn't be great either, right? That's exactly what's happened here. It's not a little like it, it's not an analogy, because George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, all of them said you are not allowed to negotiate with drug companies. You will bow your head and pay them an extra $73 billion that we definitely do not have to pay them if we negotiated like every other country in the world. And by the way, Obama ran campaign ads saying that he would defeat it, that he wouldn't do that policy, and he did anyway. And now you tell me it's not corruption? Sorry, I believe the much simpler possibility. It is corruption. Obama and the rest of the Democratic Party got paid by the drug companies, as they're getting paid today, to do that corruption, to help them rob you of that $73 billion. I know what their excuses are. Oh, we had to do a deal in order to get the Heritage Foundation plan passed. We killed the public option. We killed negotiating with drug prices. We left the entire health insurance industry in private hands and at their mercy, and they were allowed to raise their prices for insurance, let alone drugs, any way that they wanted. All those compromises we had to make, but what a lucky break. Our donors totally agreed with that. Wow, so lucky, Obama and the Democrats. Then Trump said, he ran ads, he went on the stump. Why can't we negotiate with drug companies? I'm gonna end that. What happened? He came in and like a little lapdog, Trump was like, yes, absolutely, sir, corruption. Trump's like, I didn't know we were doing corruption. Of course I jump in it. So now Trump and all the Republicans say, no, do not negotiate drug prices. It is insane. Is this capitalism, guys? Is this capitalism when you say, I'm not gonna negotiate anything? I'm just gonna, whatever a company tells me to do, I'm just gonna hand, not my money, the taxpayers' money. The taxpayers' money. If you're a conservative, you should despise this. So no, Joe Scarborough, rest of television, I do not agree to this bipartisan agreement. This is a bipartisan agreement to rob us blind. Where's my goddamn $73 billion? And by the way, some people don't take those drugs because they're so expensive. And you know what happens? They die. That's real. They're in the middle of a fire and we don't send them help. And we say, oh, you want the fire out? You got cancer? You got something that is existential threat, life or death? We're not gonna send help. And on top of that, we're gonna charge you more, making it more likely that you're gonna die. No, if you have a bipartisan agreement on things that the American people agreed to, wonderful. If you have it on stuff that the donors agreed to and that the American people hate, no deal. So call them what they are. These Democrats that go to these retreats and sell you out, they are not on your team. They're not your colleagues. They're the corporate donors' colleagues. And they're paid to rob you like they did here.
So presidential candidates are, of course, discussing Medicare for all. And Kamala Harris had to clarify her statement. So let's talk about that a little bit. During Kamala Harris's first town hall with CNN, she was asked a question about Medicare for all and whether or not she supported it. Now, she gave a pretty strong answer, and it appeared that she was very supportive of Medicare for all. But then later, there was a little bit of equivocating happening. There was a little bit of a concession to some of the more moderate Democrats when it came to this issue. And so recently, Jake Tapper asked her to clarify what her true position is, and here's what she had to say.
You said on stage with me in January that when it comes to private insurance, quote, let's eliminate all of that, let's move on.
Yes.
Now you later said we don't need to get rid of all private insurance. So
but let's clear that.
Which is it exactly?
We were together.
Yes.
And you'll remember and roll the tape, please.
Yeah, we can roll the tape. Well, you support the Bernie Sanders bill, which essentially gets rid of insurance.
I support Medicare for all, but I really do need to clear up what happened on that stage.
Okay.
It was in the context of saying, let's get rid of all the bureaucracy. Let's get all of the ways.
Oh, not the insurance companies.
No, that's not what I meant. I know it was interpreted that way. If you watch the tape, I think you'll see that there are obviously many interpretations of what I said. What I meant is let's get rid of the bureaucracy.
Okay, we're gonna roll the tape for you. So she asked, we'll do that because we care about the facts here. So far, Jake Tapper's done nothing wrong. He's challenging her on something that any good journalist should challenge her on. Well, you said get rid of private insurance, then you walked it back. So which one is it? Great question, no problem at all. Her answer, I mean, there's the awkward laughing because she got caught. And so, all right, move past the style, go to the substance. And she says, no, I just meant get rid of the bureaucracy. I'm not sure that's what you meant at all. And those two things they don't make sense. So like, do you wanna get rid of private insurers or don't you? So let's roll the tape and see what she actually said back then.
What is your solution to ensure that people have access to quality health care at an affordable price? And does that solution involve cutting insurance companies as we know them out of the equation?
I believe the solution, and I'm actually feel very strongly about this, is that we need to have Medicare for all. That's just the bottom line.
Correct me if I'm wrong. To reiterate, you support the Medicare for All bill. I think initially co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. You're also a co-sponsor on it. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Well, listen, the idea is that everyone gets access to medical care. And you don't have to go through the process of going through an insurance company, having them give you approval, going through the paperwork, all of the delay that may require. Who of us has not had that situation where you got to wait for approval and the doctor says, well, I don't know if your insurance company is going to cover this? Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
So she could say, hey, I said eliminate all of that when referring to all that paperwork, et cetera. But clearly he asked, would you get rid of private insurance? And she began by saying yes, and she ended by saying, let's get rid of all of that. So, and by the way, that's actually a good answer.
Right.
She should have just stuck with it instead of doing what politicians do. Afterwards, she had her spokespeople walk it back, and now she's somewhere in the middle of the road. And even after the second Tapper interview, I'm not exactly sure where she is.
Right, so she does seem to be wishy-washy when it comes to this issue. But later in the interview, she gets a little more specific. So I want you to watch and tell me if you're gonna give her any credit. Let's take a look at the next tape.
The bill gets rid of insurance.
But no, it does not get rid of insurance. It does not get rid of insurance. And listen, and let me just tell you where I am. Let's tell you where I am.
All right.
I support Medicare for all. It is my preferred
as a principle, you mean, not Bernie Sanders' bill?
I support the bill.
Okay.
I support the bill.
Because the bill gets rid of private insurance for everything that
it doesn't get rid of supplemental insurance.
Right, for cosmetic surgery, but for all.
So it doesn't get rid of all insurance.
Okay, it doesn't get rid of all insurance,
right.
But for all essential healthcare benefits.
But why? Ask the question why. The question, if the answer to that question is because Medicare for all and the vision of what it will be includes an expansion of coverage. So Medicare for all will include vision, it'll include dental, it'll include hearing aids.
So I love the second half of that answer.
Yeah,
and I
me
wish
too.
She'd have stayed on that and she'd have emphasized it more. But she is trying to equivocate.
Yes.
She's trying to put out there, I'm not saying get rid of all private insurance, but I'm for Medicare for all, which would get rid of all private insurance except supplemental insurance for things like cosmetic surgery. If you're gonna have that position, go in defending it, and then you'll be a champion for it, and we'll rally, and we'll be like, hey, that's it, that's wonderful. But when you equivocate, you're doing it for a reason, and we know it. So you could turn around and say to people who are not in favor of Medicare for all, well, I didn't say I'd get rid of all private insurance, and turn around to the people who like Medicare for all and say, I did say I'm for Medicare for all. You want it both ways. And it's not the old days. In the 1990s, you could have done that till the cows came home. Now you're gonna get caught. And now what could have been a good answer has now turned into a bad answer because you look like a politician.
Yeah, I agree with you in that the second part of the interview was much stronger, but the way that she words everything is for future plausible deniability.
100%.
Depending on where the country's headed, depending on where the party's headed. And so she doesn't want to get pushback from those who are super supportive of Medicare for all. She doesn't want to get pushback from those who are not supportive of Medicare for all, which is the Democratic establishment for the most part. Now, there was one tiny snippet of this interview that was incredibly strong, and I want to give her credit for it. Let's take a look.
The bill also says, quote, every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for healthcare services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. So you support giving universal healthcare, Medicare for all to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
I love that.
Yes, so normally when she says, let me be clear about this, she's about to be unclear about it, but not in that case.
Right.
In that case, she was clear about it. So that was a very solid answer. Now let's go to Jake Tapper. Okay, can you frame things from a more Mitch McConnell point of view? Correct answer is no, you cannot. And so if Jake was like the BBC and he's challenging all comers very aggressively, that's fine. And he could turn around and say, hey, look, I don't have a point of view on Medicare for all or not Medicare for all. I'm just asking tough questions of Kamala Harris. Should we get rid of private insurance or shouldn't we? Okay, that would be one thing. And can Jake Tapper say he's been tough on the Trump administration? From time to time, definitely. Is he tough on establishment Republicans? Hell no. Hell no, he never challenges Mitch McConnell and Ted Cruz that way, no way. So what's wrong with the framing? He says, people like their private insurance. Are you gonna get rid of that private insurance? Well, yes, Why? Because you're not telling the whole truth to the American people when you frame that question in that way. We get rid of that insurance to give you better insurance. What do I mean by better? It covers more things. So if you're worried like, oh, right now my insurance has a low copay, good news, this has no copay. Well, my insurance is pretty good because it covers cancer and heart attacks. I mean, it doesn't cover other issues. Good news, Medicare for All covers all of that and everything else, all the way through dental and vision. Now, every time the tappers of the world frame it as, you're getting rid of private insurance, and they don't tell you the other half of the equation, which is that you would get better insurance. That is journalistic malpractice.
Yeah, and going back to the last video that we showed you, the way he asked the question was 100% inaccurate. So he specifically mentions that the proposal would cover residents of the United States, and then he proceeded to ask her, do you support health insurance, or I'm sorry, coverage for people who are here illegally? Well, first of all, it would cover residents who are not here illegally. And secondly, residents pay taxes. So why wouldn't they have access to the healthcare provided under Medicare for All?
Besides which, undocumented people also pay taxes.
That's true, yeah.
Through payroll tax and sales tax. And since they're not documented, they never get that money back. In fact, studies have shown that they pay more into the system than they get out of the system. But when Tapper frames it that way, it makes it seem like, oh, well, the right wing is right. These people are they're here illegally and milking off of us by getting like treatment for a gunshot or for a heart attack.
For an illness,
We're not letting them bleed to death on the streets, and they didn't pay into it, but actually they did. And so that is why the framing is all wrong. So that's why when they said about Saddam Hussein, hey, did he do 9/11? 70% of the country thought he did when we went to the Iraq War, because the media said Bush says this, Cheney says this, Bush says this, Cheney says this, and they never corrected them.
They just
Saddam didn't do 9/11. So that was terrible journalism. Can I at least, I mean, at this point, they always admit like, oh, well, there were some problems during the Iraq War coverage and we should have done better. Okay, how? How should you have done better? You should have given the full information instead of the talking point from both sides or either side. You should have actually pursued the truth rather than what the Republican Party says or the Democratic Party says. But have they learned from that? Have they fixed it? No. So when the Republican talking point is, they're gonna take your private insurance away that you like so much. Why do you like it? It has low deductibles. I can deal with my premium. And you don't tell them that the new plan has no deductibles, no premiums, no copays, and covers more. Well, then that's horrible. It's misrepresenting what the reality is. Now, if you were to say, hey, taxes are gonna go up for 5% of the country in order to make this happen, that would be true. Okay, then say that. And you wanna give that context? No problem. About 95% of the country has lower costs under this system. 5% does have higher costs. Okay, be upfront about that. We're not looking to hide the ball. But when you make it seem like Medicare for All is higher taxes and people just don't even have insurance, that's insane. And if you say, oh, no, everybody knows that. No, they don't. No, they don't, because all they ever hear is television pundits tell them how there's no private insurance. And so look, Kamala Harris, stop going with what your consultants are telling you and what your gut as a politician is, which is equivocation. You're actually right on Medicare for All. You're right on supporting Bernie Sanders' bill. Come out guns blazing. Don't say on that one hand this, on the other hand that. Say, Jake, understand you did half of that here. You could have done the whole interview on that. Yeah, we take away private insurance because we give you better insurance. Be strong. Kamala Harris has it in her to be super strong.
Yes.
So by all means, do it already.
When we come back from the break, Cory Booker does not have it in him to be strong. He has it in him to be super slimy, especially when it comes to attacking other fellow Democrats.
Can I just say on that, he's amazing, because I might actually agree with him on the issue, but the way he does it is he loses me. He's unreal. He's such a politician. All right, we'll tell you when we come back.
They failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was bad.
Jake Uger, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up. Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World. This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And fill and host beat CNN and headline news combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air. Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right? Or mid-iguana, and you've got both things going on. It's almost like you're our Christmas tree. Like this is a pre-Christmas special, and you're in a. Is that what it is, Lizard? Are you in a Christmas mood?
I think so. 'Tis the season. I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep. Look at me.
He's got his orange side, he's got his green side, and he's sticking his tongue out at us while talking. I've never seen the lizard like this before.
But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
All right, back on TYT. Let's go to member comments first. By the way, I still have a cough, so buckle up for that. Katie Nicole 87 says, I should be working on my 15-page final paper that's due tomorrow, but I've got to watch TYT. Correct priorities.
Oh, I would love to go back to school. I would love it so much.
Can you do these while I cough?
God, I'm so jealous. Yeah. Go ahead. All right, look, lots of fun things are happening at TYT. For instance, Game of Thrones, it's still happening, and TYT is still reviewing every episode of Game of Thrones every Sunday night. And episode 5 was just recently reviewed by Cenk. Were all these people involved? Yes, Brooke, John, Ben. You guys should have watched it. You should have watched the Game of Thrones episode, and you should have watched the review, because last night's episode was insane. Also, we're doing an Ask Me Anything on our post-game Tuesdays, starting May 14th. And you can watch live by going to tyt.com/live to watch it as we stream. And of course, if you're a member, you can get access to that anytime.
Okay, let me just say 2 quick things about that. Only members can ask questions on Ask Me Anything. But it's freely available to everybody. So make sure you check it out. That's tomorrow, okay? And then on Game of Thrones, we're doing the last one obviously on Sunday. And I was gonna say Khaleesi returns, but now I don't know that you want that title, Anna.
I don't.
Okay, because you were Khaleesi. Oops. So.
Although when I get mad, I.
There is definitely Dracarys involved. So the great return of Anna Kasparian to Game of Thrones reviews. There's actually going to be 7 of us. So we're all going to bring the whole band together for the last episode. So don't miss that. And check out our predictions if you remember, tyt.com/join to see who's going to win, who's going to sit on the throne on the last episode. Is it Daenerys, is it Jon Snow, or a number of wild cards we mentioned?
Ooh.
In fact, neither one of them won the poll at the end.
What? I gotta watch the review.
That's right.
Awesome.
And a couple of comments here. Stiff Upper Lib writes in member section, right off the bat, TYT shows why I listen to them and not network news. It's about the money. It's 6:03 and I'm hearing things I won't hear on the multi-billion-dollar finance network news. Facts are facts. I bathe in Ben Shapiro's tears.
Oh, yes.
Writes in, gotta love Jenk and Destroy segments. Thank you. Mimi on Twitter says, Kamala is so fake to me. She's like reality TV, very poorly scripted. I just don't trust her. And Bernice Panders says, yes, Jenk, I'm stuck in a small town, 98% whitewashed, conservative, religious, Trump-supporting Republicans like my family. They expect me to get by on an unsustainable disability of $400 a month after minimum medical costs and say, quit crying and get off my vital meds. Hashtag poverty.
Jeez.
I mean, when you say bootstraps is getting off of your medication, which you need to live, I think that, and you call that, conservatives call that compassion? No, that's insanity, man. That's the exact opposite. All right, we got a lot more stories for you guys.
Elizabeth Warren has proposed breaking up the big tech companies. Now, out of all the Democratic candidates, she has come out with more policy proposals, more detailed policy proposals. And guess what? Cory Booker is not having it. Here he is on ABC's This Week.
Elizabeth Warren's already out there saying break up Facebook, break up Google.
But I don't think
break up Amazon.
Right, but I don't think that a president should be running around pointing at companies and saying breaking them up without any kind of process here. It's not me and my own personal opinion about going after folks. That sounds more like a Donald Trump thing to say, like I'm going to break up you guys. No, we need to create systems and processes.
You just compared Elizabeth Warren to Donald Trump.
I most certainly did not.
Well, that's what she's saying. She's the one that's saying that.
Well, again, she has. Let her discuss and debate her positions. I'm telling you right now, we do not need a president that is going to use her own personal beliefs and tell you which companies we should break up.
Okay, so what are your positions? I'm very, very curious, right? Other than giant favors for the pharmaceutical industry so we can't negotiate drug prices. Anyway, her policy is actually pretty detailed, and New York Times, of all places, went into detail about her policy and talked about exactly what she would attempt to do. So let me give you those details. Let me fact check Cory Booker and tell you exactly what she wants. So Warren laid out her proposal calling for regulators who would undo some tech mergers, as well as legislation that would prohibit platforms from both offering a marketplace for commerce and participating in that marketplace. So for instance, if you're on Amazon, you can use Amazon to purchase products, but Amazon also creates its own products that you can buy in that marketplace. Companies would be barred from transferring or sharing users' data with third parties. Dual entities such as Amazon Marketplace and Amazon Basics would be split apart. Now let's go to process a little bit. Warren's plan creates 2 tiers of companies that would fall under the new regulations. Those that have an annual global revenue of $25 billion or more, and those with annual revenue of 90 million to 25 billion. The upper tier would be required to structurally separate their products from their marketplace. Smaller companies would be subject to regulations, but would not be forced to separate themselves from the online marketplace. Anyway, if you read the proposal, it's incredibly, incredibly detailed. And for him to just claim, oh, there's no processes, she's just like Trump. First of all, it sounds like your consultants told you to compare her to Trump.
100%.
Right, and that's such a low, below the belt hit, and it's disgusting. And secondly, what are you proposing? Like, what do you bring to the table? Because so far I haven't seen anything.
He's agreed with some other proposals. Okay, so look, this is why Cory Booker would have been a good politician in the 1990s, and that's what TV pundits look for. So they really like Cory Booker. Him and Klobuchar are artificially inflated because all the TV pundits like them, and they keep putting them in the upper batch of candidates based on really nothing. And they're, even with all that extra hype and marketing, they're still polling at 2%. At most I've ever seen is like 3%.
Sad.
And so why? Because for this day and age, Cory Booker is actually a pretty bad politician. And so let me explain. In this case, I probably agree with him. I'm not sure that breaking up Facebook, Amazon, et cetera, is the right way to go now. I'd rather focus on other industries. We've talked about it on the show before. It's a super legitimate debate. And I might be convinced later that it is time, but right now I'm not in that camp.
Right.
So I actually agree with Cory Booker, but somehow he lost me anyway.
Okay, hold. So I don't want to reopen that debate. We've already had it on the show. But the one thing that I want to note is that he's not arguing against breaking up these companies. He's arguing that Elizabeth Warren hasn't thought this through and hasn't really detailed the processes in getting it done. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, he didn't clarify, but he certainly seems to be in the camp based on what he said there, that he thinks it's not a good idea, and that it's not about the substance, but that it is about, it's personal, like Trump makes it personal, that somehow Elizabeth Warren has some personal animus towards these companies. Based on what? What did Amazon ever do to her? Did they deliver something late? I don't know any of that. What are you talking about? Right? So Facebook did once remove one of her ads attacking Facebook, but then they put it back. But that's not but that was after she announced that she thought they should be broken up. So that makes no sense. Look, he's attacking a fellow Democrat, but I'm in the camp of that's totally okay. So we're in a primary. If Cory Booker wants to say, hey, look, I think Facebook, et cetera, should not be broken up. Elizabeth Warren does think that. We disagree. This is why we disagree. And so have a legitimate debate over it. So even though he started out with me in his camp on it's okay to attack another Democrat, and I largely agree with you on the policy, he lost me anyway. Why? What'd you do? You just compared her to Trump? What the hell did you do that for? Because that's needlessly, gratuitously demeaning for no reason at all, other than probably one of your consultants told you, just compare progressives to Donald Trump. They're both radicals, and that'll shore up your centrist base. How's that working out for you, Cory?
Right.
Okay, and then to have the worst criticism of Elizabeth Warren I have ever seen, that she doesn't have detailed enough process. Have you ever read any of her proposals? She's by far the most detailed in the proposals. That's not even close. I really like Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren policies are more detailed, more process oriented, and it's not close, okay?
And it is interesting because on one hand, you'll have some members of the Democratic establishment argue that she's too wonky, she's too policy oriented, she's too detailed, it's working against her. And then on the other hand, you'll have people like Cory Booker just completely make things up and make it appear as though she hasn't thought things through and she's nothing more than another version of Trump. And I think the attempt to compare her to Trump was a way of getting some cheap buzz. Because again, what has he brought to the table? If you bring something new and exciting policy-wise to the table, people would discuss your policy, but no one's discussing your policy because you've brought nothing new and exciting to the table. And more importantly, can you imagine, just think for 1 second, if Bernie Sanders had just done an interview on ABC's This Week and compared Joe Biden to Donald Trump, can you imagine the anger, the calls for unity? How dare you?
100%.
So it's just fascinating how there is a double standard in the Democratic Party where progressives and in the media, where progressives are just not allowed to ever fight the other side. But when it comes to the Klobuchars or the Cory Bookers of the world, they can literally compare the progressives to Trump and it just flies under the radar, no big deal.
Oh, I mean, the other day, Hickenlooper compared Bernie Sanders to Stalin. And while at the same time saying, I don't attack other candidates.
It's amazing.
And by the way, so that is aided and abetted by the media. I said the media because the media, when they compare progressives to Trump or Stalin, makes note of it. Jonathan Karl, to be fair, made note of it, and then they move on. They don't find it scandalous. But if you compare an establishment candidate to one of those people, they'd be like, what these radical progressives, look at these outrageous lack of civility. To compare someone to a murderer like Joseph Stalin or to a monster like Donald Trump. Lack of civility and lack of unity. So the double standard is unbearable. By the way, that goes to Cory Booker's third strike in that interview. He said, Jonathan Karl rightfully says, oh, you just compared Elizabeth Warren to Donald Trump. And he says, no, I didn't. We all just heard it. We can rewind the tape. But he's such a politician, he can't help himself. No, I didn't. My consultants told me to because it's gonna give me attention and get me a bump, but they also told me to deny it while I'm doing it.
It's crazy.
It's not at all clever. I mean, Cory Booker is the classic definition of you're gonna get caught. Right, I've been saying that about the internet catches you. It's not the old days where cable news guys are like, oh, Cory, Klobuchar, oh, you guys are so good. And they never question you. The internet's gonna catch you, and Booker always gets caught. So now, last thing, to be fair to Booker, he is really good and better than the rest on one issue, criminal justice reform, okay?
Okay.
No, he is.
You're right.
So Senator Booker, why don't you concentrate on that? Why don't you go on the warpath on that? Like Andrew Yang has done on universal basic income. And Elizabeth Warren has on the banks, and Bernie has on income inequality and Medicare for all, et cetera. You could own that and say, if I'm president, we're gonna get, and look, some of the stuff you might have said from time to time. And again, I'm giving you credit for the good work that you did in Congress, and by the way, got a pass, and you should rightfully brag about that, okay? But say, I'm gonna end the marijuana prohibition immediately and talk about it in every case, and we're going to free all those people who were wrongly imprisoned, mostly because of the color of their skin, all across America. And we're not gonna have it. We're gonna end private prisons. We're gonna do things like that. Be strong and forceful on the issue that you're good at. And look, then you wanna back up everybody on Medicare for all, Green New Deal, great, then you've got a lane. But if your lane is centrist, corporate friendly, don't touch my friends in the corporate world, that's a terrible lane, and you're gonna get run over. So I'm telling you, you wanna listen to it, that's your issue. You don't wanna listen, you wanna be angry about it, that's your issue. But that's the reality, and this is not playing well. Nobody looks at that interview and thinks, Booker nailed it, Warren's just like Trump. Thank God, I'm now voting for Cory Booker. Said 0 people in America.
When we come back from the break, we will discuss the latest instance of the right wing twisting Representative Rashida Tlaib's words to make her seem as if she is anti-Semitic.
Oh man, if you mentioned warpath, buckle up, brace for impact for when we come back.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Hassan D. Piker and on Twitter at Hassan the Hun. And this has been The Breakdown. Was that good, guys?
Okay, not enough hashtag use. Hashtag abs, hashtag model, hashtag woke bae.
Hashtag one black friend.
I'm thinking more rings.
I got them here.
You need more accessories, way more accessories.
I don't know where to put it.
Come on, throw these on. Woke bae, not sleep bae.
More sexy too.
When's the last time you posted on Instagram? Too long, come on, man. No, you need to post at least once an hour. What's the outfit of the day today? Is this what you're going with? No. We need more accessories, we need.
This doesn't have anything to do, it doesn't.
For your gay audience, man.
Yeah, the gays love you, man.
Okay, what else? What else do I need to do?
You haven't appropriated a culture in a week.
We have like a kimono or something.
Damn, that looks good on you, dude.
Perfect. How many rings you got on? Do we have any more?
I got 3 more.
Yeah, can we get more rings on this?
And when you're done, kiss the ring. Look at the camera. Kiss the ring. Maybe like a little wink.
Islam's role in terrorism and all the Huffington Post articles weren't doing well. I wasn't.
How many likes did our last outfit of the day picture have?
Only like 100,000.
So I think that's where your focus needs to be. I hear you on all the blah, blah, blah social issue. We need to focus on followers.
Kids in Yemen.
We don't care if you sleep at night.
Dab, dab.
Okay, I'll dab.
There you go.
More.
Talk about yourself more.
Yeah. I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, be more into it.
Instagram is important for me. Americans losing access to healthcare coverage.
I hear you. Attack Tommy more.
I've done it so many. She shoots out of her living room now. It's like punching down now.
We're okay with that. It helps the brand.
We made you. We got you verified.
You're nothing
like, come
without
on.
us.
So I don't know what else I need to do here.
Dude, just take off that shirt.
That's exactly why Tommy Lauren is stupid. I hate you. I'm Hassan Piker. Follow me on Instagram.
#WokeBay.
#WokeBay. Please follow me.
I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken when I first got my license, like 17 years old or 17, 18, whatever it was. And I'm driving, I think, my dad's Oldsmobile. And I parked it in a place where there was 2 cars next to me, really tight spot, and a car behind me. I don't even know how I got in there because I'm a terrible driver. Back then I was an even worse driver. And on the roads I'm okay, but in parking spots I have terrible spatial reasoning and I'm a mess. And on my way out, I hit all 3 cars at once. I broke all records, okay? So I went, as I'm backing out, I went boom, oh and this side hit that car, this side hit this car, and the back hit the 3rd car, okay? And I got stuck. I didn't know how to get out. Like, I went, okay, this, and then I'm like, no, and then, right? And then finally I had to stop, go inside the KFC and go, I'm sorry, I hit a bunch of your cars. They're like, what do you mean a bunch of your cars? I'm like, I don't know.
Wow, there's a B?
Yeah. I'm like, I hit 3 cars. I don't know. So you guys gotta come help me, okay? Okay, so 1, my bad. Really sorry about that. Okay, number 2, can someone take my car out? Because I don't want to keep hitting your cars, and I'm incapable of taking it out of this spot.
Hey, Cenk, what's up?
Aaron, did they change the icon for Vine? I can't find it. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
All right, back on the Young Turks, lots of great comments here. Rocky Mountain Landon in our member section says, with all due respect, how the hell do you consider yourself a progressive but aren't on board with breaking up monopolies and using antitrust laws? So that's directed at me, and you're fired, okay? Wait, I can't do that, you can fire me. Okay, I'm playing. Look, I am for using antitrust laws. I am against monopolies. I just want to go after lower hanging fruit first. And so I think that we should look at all the different companies and their monopoly power. I think media is a huge target, and because they have consolidated power more than almost any other industry.
Yep.
I think there are many other industries like banking that we should look at. And so I'm not opposed to the tech situation. I just would want to study it more, and I would get to it after the more dangerous situation, in my opinion, okay? But that's a fine debate to have, and thank you for challenging us. We appreciate that. The Mathematician says, the final episode of Game of Thrones will be 3 hours long. My prediction, the final episode will jump forward decades to see the fate of survivors and Daenerys haunted by the slaughter at King's Landing, and they return.
Spoiler alerts, but
yeah, but
I know,
okay.
I know.
Yeah,
People
I hear you, right? And the return of the Night King. Yes, you read correctly. Okay. That's a wild prediction, okay? But let's see what happens. Anyway, that's of course right after the show review on Sunday night right here. And then last 2 here from Twitter are Joya Januszewski says, making my dad listen to the Young Turks on this 5-hour drive back to Dayton. I think he's digging it so far. Hey, Mr. Januszewski, how you doing? Appreciate that you're giving us a shot. And Gaining Traction says, Anna, speaking of going back to school, at 44 years old, I start law in August, in large part due to your coverage and the hope that AOC gave me. I figured if she can do what she did, I can do this. Wow.
Yes, you can.
Si se puede. Okay, thank you for writing that in. Look, you also inspire us. Okay, so, Anna, what's next?
During a recent interview with Yahoo News, Rashida Tlaib had defended her preference for a one-state solution in Israel. And she was also taken out of context by right-wingers who tried to make her appear as some sort of anti-Semitic individual who's against Jewish people and the state of Israel. Now, I'm gonna give you the full video in context and then we'll discuss. Take a look.
What is your vision for a one-state solution that meets both Palestinian and Israeli or Jewish national aspirations?
Absolutely, and let me tell you, I mean, for me, just I think 2 weeks ago or so, we celebrated, it took a moment, I think, in our country to remember the Holocaust. And there's a kind of a calming feeling I always tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust, and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, the human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out, and some people's passport. I mean, just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy and horrific persecution of Jews across the world at that time. And I love the fact that it was my ancestors that provided that, right, in many ways. But they did it in a way that took their human dignity away, right? And it was forced on them. And so when I think about one state, I think about the fact that why couldn't we do it in a better way? Where, and I don't want people to do it in the name of Judaism, just like I don't want people to use Islam in that way. It has to be done in a way of values around equality and around the fact that you shouldn't oppress others so that you can feel free and safe. Why can't we all be free and safe together?
So all of you who just watched it, you saw what she said, you know what she intended, meant, and clearly stated. It wasn't even that ambiguous at all. She said, look, the Holocaust was tragic and horrific, and it shouldn't have, the state of Israel shouldn't have necessarily been created in the way that it was, and you can disagree with that, right? But at least I take some comfort in knowing that it created a safe haven for Jews. Mm-hmm. So, who had just escaped this tragedy of the Holocaust. Super clear. Now we're gonna show you what Republicans said about it, and then actually some reporters, believe it or not, actually corrected the Republicans this time.
Right.
Okay.
And I wanna also emphasize the two phrases that really stood out to me while she was speaking. Tragedy of the Holocaust, horrific persecution of Jews. Those were phrases verbatim from that last video. Now the US ambassador to Israel tweeted about this and said, quote, "Your words are both grossly anti-Semitic and ignorant. You should take some time to learn the history before trying to rewrite it." Liz Cheney, a very noted warmonger, says, "Surely Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer will finally take action against vile anti-Semitism in their ranks. This must cross a line, even for them." Rashida Tlaib says thinking of the Holocaust provides her a calming feeling. No, that is not what she said. She did not say thinking of the Holocaust gives her a calming feeling. I mean, she specifically said it gave her a calming feeling to know that a safe place was created for them. But of course, they have every incentive to twist her words and make her out to be some sort of dangerous person who's against the Jewish community and the state of Israel, which is not the case.
Paul Waldman wrote in the Washington Post, if you read Tlaib's words and decided that she said thinking of the Holocaust itself gave her a calming feeling, you'd have to be too stupid to be capable of tying your own shoes. And he said, look, Liz Cheney might be a lot of things, but she ain't stupid. She's doing it on purpose. And he said, she is, quote, unconstrained by any concern for truth or morality. That is absolutely true. It also applies to Steve Scalise. Scalise said, and wait till you get a load of what Scalise has done in the past. He said, there is no justification for the twisted and disgusting comments made by Rashida Tlaib just days after the annual day of Holocaust remembrance. More than 6 million Jews were murdered during the time, etc. Right? Oh, during the Holocaust, he said, and there is nothing calming about that fact. But she didn't say there was anything calming about that fact, and that's a brazen lie. So the Washington Post followed up in a different article, and they asked them, look, you must have obviously not heard the second half of the statement, where she didn't say it was calming that the Holocaust happened, said it was calming that at least there was a safe haven for Jews after the Holocaust happened. And Cheney and Scalise's offices both said, yeah, don't care. No, we think she's a vile anti-Semite and thought the Holocaust was coming. And the reporter Amber Phillips in that case is like, oh my God, I don't understand. She said, it's a brazen example of how reality is mattering less and less in politics. She went on to say that this is a particularly fact-free and baseless attack. It's as close as it gets to just making stuff up. So finally, reporters doing a wonderful job of calling it as it is. Although far too many headlines still repeat, Republicans call Rashida Tlaib anti-Semitic. That's a terrible headline.
Yes.
As Paul Waldman correctly points out, he says the headline should reflect what the reality of the story is. And the reality of the story is, he said, Republicans smear Democrat with bogus anti-Semitism charge would be the more correct headline that would accurately capture what is happening in this case. And if you're wondering about Steve Scalise, well, maybe he's really so sensitive about anti-Semitism and clouded his judgment of being able to understand the English language, right? Well, he does care about anti-Semitism, but not necessarily in the way that you would expect. He's one of the top 3 Republicans in the House. Earlier in his career, he gave a speech to a white supremacist group and told them that he is, quote, David Duke without the baggage.
But they don't get attacked as anti-Semitic. I mean, Mo Brooks in March of this year read from Mein Kampf on the House floor. And was there any anger from Republicans? Was there any anger from the media? Of course not. Of course not. And so the one thing that Republicans do well, unfortunately, with the help of the media, is perpetuating lies about their political opponents. And that's exactly what's happening with Rashida Tlaib. That's exactly what's happening with Representative Omar. And it's just, we're constantly in this position of playing defense. They're constantly playing offense. They're constantly twisting words and trying to smear people. And then the left is left trying to figure out how to rebut all of their ridiculous claims.
So again, Waldman broke this down perfectly. He talked about a 5-step way that the Republicans do this on a regular basis. It always starts out on the blogs, right-wing blogs that don't care about truth or reality. It jumps to Fox News, it jumps to Republican leaders, then it goes to Trump. And most importantly, aided and abetted by most of the mainstream media, which then takes the headline of controversy around whether Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib is anti-Semitic. Well, once you framed it that way, they've already lost the battle. And so the media has to do a much better job. Here they have begun that process, but overall, they have to do a much better job of accurately titling these things and calling them what it is.
Yes.
So any rational person that watched that clip knows that she did not call the Holocaust coming. So when they lie about it, you have to call it a lie. You have to call it a lie, otherwise you're not being objective. You're doing political correctness on behalf of the Republican Party.
By the way, speaking of accurate labels, I made a little mistake earlier in the show when I mentioned Danny Danon. I read his tweet. He's actually Israel's ambassador to the UN, not the US ambassador to Israel. So I just want to make that quick correction. Now,
yes, I just want to say about that.
Yeah.
Look, if Israel's ambassador doesn't like what Rashida Tlaib is saying, and it's because he represents the right-wing government of Israel, that is not at all surprising. So I'm not bothered by that. Of course he's gonna say, oh my God, she defended Palestinians. They should have no rights. We should occupy them for the rest of time. That's not a surprising statement, okay? Yes, I did hyperbole on his statement, okay? It's not exactly what he said. We read you the exact quote earlier. Now, see, we are honest about our point of view. But when the Republicans come in and lie about what Rashida Tlaib said, why do they do it? Because of the second guilty party here. One is the media that calls it 50-50 and helps to smear these Democrats and progressives. The other is Democratic leadership. Why does Liz Cheney say, hey, it's time for Pelosi and Hoyer to do something? Because last time they bullied Pelosi and Hoyer. They actually didn't have to bully him much.
Right.
Pelosi and Hoyer wanted to throw Ilhan Omar under a bus. And so they did it to Ilhan Omar, and they're like, why don't you execute politically Tlaib like we had you do to Ilhan Omar? Hurry up and do it already. By the way, you should know this. This is an important facet of politics, and it's involved in the story. There are progressive groups that fight back, and they do make a difference, and you could be part of that. So Justice Democrats immediately put out a press release saying, that Democratic leadership should do the opposite and back Tlaib. And within 2 hours of that, they in fact did.
Nice.
So Pelosi and Democratic leadership in this case did back Tlaib. I mean, look, it's so easy because one side is 100% right, the other side is completely made up of fake controversy. But even then, you got to hold your breath with Democratic leadership.
100%.
But the pressure is super important. Just Democrats puts on the pressure, and then they get the result. And so good. Again, positive movement in the media and Democratic leadership in this issue. But overall, they shouldn't have done it to Omar. They've got to fight back. Their weakness encourages Republicans like Liz Cheney. And I noted the hypocrisy of Scalise. I mean, can you imagine anyone who says they're David Duke without the baggage and talking about anti-Semitism with a straight face?
Yeah, I can totally imagine it.
And that's the Republicans.
Yeah.
And by the way, the guy who pointed that out is Jonathan Chait, writing for New York Magazine. He also said, quote, amazingly, her positive comment about the establishment of the state of Israel is being twisted into a positive comment about the Holocaust. And of course, that's also not true. Another reporter doing a great job of pointing it out, even though he doesn't agree with her one-state solution. By the way, neither do I. But you have to be honest about what she actually said, okay? And in terms of Liz Cheney, you're talking about how you're concerned about things that might have gone wrong in a war. Why don't you look around the house and see if you could find a war criminal? And after you've criticized your own dad for torture and the killing of up to about 1 million civilians in Iraq, including all those children, then maybe we could have a conversation about whether you care about war crimes. And one of our viewers made a great point on Twitter. They said, you remember Liz Cheney condemned her own sister to win in Wyoming, said gay marriage is wrong. Her sister is in a marriage and part of the LGBT community. But she wouldn't condemn her dad for torture and war crimes. That's who Liz Cheney is. So I'm not having a conversation about what Liz Cheney thinks Democrats should do on made up charges. No, Democrats need to fight back super hard. If I was Democratic leadership, you know what I'd do today? I'd be like, oh, Liz Cheney, thank you for bringing up the issue of anti-Semitism, because we are going to do a bill on that, just like we did with Ilhan Omar. And this time, we're gonna name names. Steve Scalise, who brags about being like David Duke. Mo Brooks, who read Mein Kampf in a positive light on the House floor. And Donald Trump, who said there was very fine people on the Nazi side of Charlottesville who chanted, the Jews will not replace us. We are going to condemn their out of control, unbelievable anti-Semitism that has actually led to people being killed in synagogues across the country. That's what the Democrats should do today.
When we come back, more attacks on Representative Ilhan Omar. Very similar story, different congresswoman.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Yes, President Donald Trump has made life hell.
Everything is always about race because the sitting president, known for his trigger Twitter fingers, somehow kept it tight-lipped over the Nazis who returned to Charlottesville last week.
If Republican politicians genuinely cared about all lives, we wouldn't be facing the largest wealth redistribution in American history.
Trump, who claims he wants to make America great again, but isn't really interested in protecting the little guy, just withdrew Obama's memo and told collectors that they're free to go back to screwing over struggling Americans with fees.
This decision will impact far and wide, especially, and listen for the irony here, those who already pay more out of pocket each year due to soaring internet package prices.
There's a ton of racist monuments in America. White supremacy is still put up on a pedestal.
Of course, more white people are killed by police. White people make up more than 75% of the US population.
So you can justify your bigotry and feel better about saying these things at dinner, polite dinner conversation with a side of racism and home fries.
Does the president normally watch these kind of anti-Muslim videos that have been
posted by this group.
Here's a list of what the president watches every day. It goes cartoons, Fox and Friends cartoons, followed by, at noon, it was a bunch of Civil War documentaries for like 6 hours. But he claps at all the wrong times.
This is the wildest, craziest motherfucking race I've ever seen. What are we gonna do? Not make brackets? Let us whisper victory. Wait a minute! All of a sudden, here comes Bernie! Good night and good luck, everybody. These are the two most unpopular candidates we have ever had in our nation's history.
Jesus Christ, there is significant boos every time Hillary Clinton's name is mentioned.
Everyone I know is voting for her out of fear. He was looking at Donald Trump's hair like it was cotton candy.
That's right. Get him out. Get him out.
It's political game. They don't care about lives.
Bow your head. This is what we mean by the establishment press.
Do you trust the establishment media?
Yeah, no.
Time on this show. What else are you gonna watch?
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited right now.
Did anybody call for an editor?
Need this in an hour.
But you're an editor too.
They did 100 squats a day for 30 days straight. I was like, how hard can that be? That doesn't sound very hard. So I'm gonna try to do this for 30 days and see if there's any difference in my physique.
3 weeks later.
Steve, how is your exercise regimen coming along with your squats?
No, I did 100, 100, 100. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
You're pacing yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, back on the Young Turks. A lot to get to, so I'm just gonna read one comment from the members. Pork Chop Express says, I'm so sick of progressives having to dumb down their explanation of the truth they speak. Nothing she said was offensive. Since the right are intimidated by smart, knowledgeable women, the only way they can respond is with controversy. But look, when they start a controversy, you have to go over the top of them and start a controversy about them. Because if all you ever do is play defense, they're gonna keep on smearing you left and right, and it's gonna keep on working. Democratic Party, either doesn't want to get it, that is a much more likely answer, but also they're not very good at strategy. I mean, at some point this week, I'm gonna do a post game about how one of my problems is that I'm too modest. Okay.
Oh my God, I can't believe you just teased that. I can't believe you just did it.
Okay,
You just did it.
I just did it.
Yeah, okay.
So that's gonna happen, but it's
gonna happen.
And so, but we're gonna talk about it in the context of strategy, and some of you might actually agree with me. And by the way, I forgot to tell you guys at the top of the show, a very, very large announcement at some point this week. A little bit later in the week, very large announcement. Okay.
What I love is that I learn about these very large announcements the same time you guys learn about them.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what it is, and it could impact my future. So that's great.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
All right. I want to let you guys know about. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and do a live read for No Filter and Squarespace. So I have a show on this network called No Filter, and today I had Tommy Christopher from Mediaite on, and he has notably put out some stuff that makes it obvious that he's not a Bernie Sanders supporter. And I think it's great to have these conversations and these debates. So check out this week's episode of No Filter. It's awesome. We get into it and talk about our differences. And then Squarespace. If you want to create a website, Squarespace is the way to do it. It's super, super easy. They have all these great templates that you can choose from. And the great thing is you get a discount if you go to squarespace.com/TYT. You get 10% off your new website.
Okay, apparently someone in the TYT army was trying to explain some tech thing to somebody, and Allison told me they wrote, It's so easy, even Jen can do it. Which is the slogan we had for our first Squarespace campaign.
Yeah.
It really is that easy. Check it out. All right, what's next?
All right. Vice President Mike Pence believes that it's incredibly problematic that Representative Ilhan Omar is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He thinks that it's a national security risk. And the conservatives at Fox Business also agree with him. So let's hear them make their case for why Rashida Tlaib is dangerous.
It is a national security threat to have this lady that has not only spewed anti-Semitism, but anti-Americanism as well. And for her to be able to have access to sensitive national security material is a threat to all Americans. And so that's why we are putting pressure. We're going to, in fact, I didn't even know the vice president had said something that echoed what we've been working on for some time. I'm probably going to seek a meeting with Vice President Pence to discuss this organization because it is a real serious crisis to have her on that committee that has access to sensitive national security.
Well, particularly if she's going to share that sensitive information with our enemies.
Okay, so I accidentally said Representative Tlaib. I meant Ilhan Omar. We were just talking about Representative Tlaib, so I had her on my mind. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But the same fear-mongering happens with both congresswomen.
Yeah, in fact, in the post game, I'm going to talk about how I actually don't agree with Rashida Tlaib's policy position on Palestine and Israel. And we're going to play you more clips from that interview. But I fully support her on the smear that was done of her. So now let's go to the smear of Ilhan Omar that they're referring to here. So she didn't say anything anti-Semitic. She didn't say anything anti-American. But that's not interesting. Of course, Fox News is smearing her that way. And of course, Fox News is lying. That's not news to anybody. I just want to point out a couple of things. One is, if you're going to attack a black representative, Fox News 101 is bring on someone black who you pay to attack other black people. So here we go. In this case, it's Innes. And Innes comes on, calls her anti-Semitic, un-American, etc. I mean, they're a comedy. It's like a self-parody. I could tell you ahead of time how they're going to criticize any progressive based on their race, gender, etc., right? And who they're going to bring on to do it. Okay, now, more importantly, Assman says, hey, what if she just tells our secrets to our enemies?
There is absolutely no evidence, no indication, no nothing that would, communicate to anyone that she would share national security or classified information with our enemies. Why are they assuming that? What makes them assume that?
Which enemies? What do you? Which is name them, Assman? Who are you talking about? Because if you're talking about people that commit fundamentalist terror attacks like the government of Saudi Arabia, she's deeply opposed to them. Your buddy Donald Trump is the one protecting them. And by the way, there's legitimate concerns that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, might have given information to the Saudis. So you want to talk about leaking to our enemies? Saudis are our allies as they go chopping up people who live in America? No, okay? And so who are you talking about enemies? Now, of course he's saying it because she's Muslim. So it is deeply bigoted. Does anyone care? Are we doing a censure resolution? Are we doing anything about that? No, all we have is smears that are repeated over and over and over again in the mainstream media of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib just because the right wing said so. So now let's have a debate about a lie, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Assman actually did go and say that she could give information to our enemies, which is an obviously Islamophobic, bigoted, racist comment. It's super obvious. You can't even debate it. Which enemies, based on what information, based on what evidence? You made that up, and you obviously made it up because she's Muslim. So that's clear, but get a load of this last irony. Remember why they claimed that Ilhan Omar was anti-Semitic in the first place? Because they said, oh, she said she questions the dual loyalty of Jews in America. Did she actually say that? No, she never said that. She said, I don't want to have allegiance to another country. I don't know why anybody would ask me to, whether it's Canada, Israel, or anything else, okay? Now, Assman turns around and says, she has dual allegiance. Wait, I thought that's the thing you were upset at her over, for claiming that people have dual allegiance. You just said it. But you said it about Muslims instead of Jews, so you're like, oh no, it's okay. I'm allowed to hate Muslims. It's called Fox News. I'm allowed to be bigot and anything I want to Muslims. And I'm allowed to call that they say that they have dual allegiance to terrorists with no evidence at all, right?
And I just want to note that she hasn't said anything recently to spur this type of conversation or this type of discussion on Fox Business. She didn't say anything. This was Vice President Mike Pence fear-mongering about the fact that she's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and then Fox takes his statements and then they, expand on it and make it appear as if she's some sort of enemy of this country who's gonna share classified information with our so-called enemies. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because they don't want her there, right? They want to make her life so miserable that she gives up, or they want to fearmonger about her enough to where her constituents might vote against her in upcoming elections. Like, this is what it's all about. It's about doing away with any type of speech or any type of perspective that challenges their own preconceived notions, that challenges the status quo. They want to make her life miserable, period. She hasn't said anything recently, right? I mean, there's nothing that you can point to say, oh, well, they're twisting her words in this one interview. Just out of nowhere, they've decided to attack her and make all these false claims about her. Now, I want to go to the second video because while they accuse her of making up lies, it appears that they're lying about something very specific. Let's take a look.
She came out with a tweet about 5 days ago about Gaza. She said, how many more protesters must be shot, rockets must be fired, little kids must be killed until the endless cycle of violence ends. The status quo of occupation and humanitarian crisis in Gaza is unsustainable. Well, she's implying that Israel is occupying Gaza. In fact, in point of fact, Gaza is not occupied by Israel. Gaza is controlled by a terrorist organization called Hamas.
So
they're not allowed to control any of their borders. Oftentimes Israel will do a blockade where they don't even let food or medicine in. But they're like, no, Gaza's unoccupied. How about the occupation in the West Bank? Now I have heard some right-wingers start to deny that there's even an occupation in the West Bank. Because they're like, as long as we're detached from reality and facts, what difference does it make?
So let's talk a little bit more about the occupation, because it was brought up in a fairly recent segment that I did with Maythal Hassan. And so some people had an issue with that word. And I want to clarify what we mean when we say occupation, especially when it comes to the Gaza Strip. So this isn't something that's made up. If you look at sources, including Amnesty International, they still consider Gaza occupied territory. And I'll tell you why. Actually, they're gonna tell you why. So I looked into this, and here's what Amnesty International believes. The Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory, the West Bank, including Eastern Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip is in its 5th decade, and the undercurrent of violence and inherent abuses of fundamental human rights and disregard for international law inherent in any long-standing military occupation is presented by both sides. Both Israeli and Palestinian civilians continue to bear the brunt of the violence in the region. So they continue to write that human rights violations by Israeli forces in the occupied Palestinian territories have included, but are not limited to, home demolitions and the forced eviction of Palestinian families, punitive arrests, unfair trials, ill treatment and torture of detainees, and the use of excessive or lethal force to subdue nonviolent demonstrations, as well as the use of restrictive legal means. I'm almost done, give me a second. The contravention of international law, in the contravention of international law, is Israel continues to build parts of the wall/fence in the occupied Palestinian territory, expand settlements, and use draconian restrictions on the movement of Palestinians with some 600 roadblocks and checkpoints. Amnesty International is also concerned about the discriminatory policies affecting access to water for Palestinians. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I have more. But the point is, to make it appear as if like the Palestinians living in Gaza are free and they're happy and they're treated fairly is just not true, right? There's one narrative here in the United States, and then there's the reality of the situation, which is discussed at length in the UN, which is discussed at length with Amnesty International, but we just refuse to accept what the facts on the ground are.
So just a little while ago, people tried to walk up to the border and they were executed. the Israeli government fired on site and killed many civilians, including doctors who were there to treat the wounded. So does that seem like they're free, that they're not occupied? I got news for you. If you're not occupied and you walk towards the border, you don't get executed.
Yeah.
And so Gaza Strip is an open air prison. And West Bank is fully occupied.
I have to give you more because I think it's important to know both sides. And yes, Hamas is terrible. Hamas is incredibly counterproductive and Hamas is making the situation much worse. But with that said, it would be just a bold-faced lie to pretend as if there's only one side that's doing things that are wrong. So again, from Amnesty International, the Gaza Strip has been under increasing restrictions since 2005, when Israel unilaterally pulled troops and settlers out of the Strip. June 2007, restrictions tightened to an almost airtight blockade, deepening the hardship there and virtually imprisoning the entire population of 1.6 million people.
So look, Hamas has done terrorism and they fire rockets into Israel. Completely unacceptable, morally, legally, in every way you could imagine, right? But Israel also fires rockets into the Gaza Strip. They both kill civilians. And just saying, well, Israel didn't mean to kill civilians, first of all, it's just not based on facts. The killing of civilians borders on indiscriminate and has been called out by every human rights organization. So basically Israel's saying, well, we had to kill their civilians. And Hamas telling us, well, we had to kill their civilians is not persuasive to me on either side. Now, what you might wanna go for is peace, but that is not what Fox News wants. That's not what Mike Pence wants. That's not what Republicans want. That's not what the right-wing government of Israel wants. Also not what the right-wing Hamas wants, okay? They are right-wing within the context of the Palestinians. The left wing in Palestine wants peace. The left wing in Israel wants peace. But we never get to peace because we're blocked by our right-wing political leaders on all sides. So that's the reality of what's happening in Israel. But if you ever dare criticize the right-wing government of Israel, Fox News will descend upon you and lie after lie after lie.
We gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to debunk some myths about us.
I'm here today to announce the program known as DACA is being rescinded.
We don't run our own country. We've lost our democracy and all we have left is rage.
Where are the Democrats? I would be on every cable news channel screaming and yelling and talking about what the Republicans are doing right now.
How do you expect us to get excited to show up to the polls for these loser Democrats? How come we have nothing but cowards who'll never fight? Primaries are everything.
Building a great wall on the southern border.
You have politicians who fearmonger about disenfranchised groups.
The first attacker came through the visa lottery.
Now they are against legal immigrants.
Ending chain migration.
They don't want people from those countries coming here because they're fucking racist. This guy's an absolute monumental disgrace to all of us as Americans.
I ordered to launch precision strikes on targets.
That is what I was warning about for literally years on this program. This is what they promised they would do if they got into power, and what do you know? They did it.
I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death.
What does this law mean? These are all just basic BS coverings.
To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
They said that this was impossible, but now we're beginning to move that boulder. And at the end, we'll get our democracy back. Primary the living hell out of these Democrats, and let's take over the party. That's a ghost ship. Let's board it, and let's take it.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when That's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watched the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring him. There's nobody there to say, you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Mayweather will knock out Pacquiao. Floyd beats his wife.
My name is Alexandra Jablonski, but I go by Alex. I don't know why I just said Alexandra. I got stuck with one of the hosts. I shouldn't say stuck. I work for one of the hosts for The Breakdown, which is Hassan Piker. And I also work on Main Show a lot of the time as well. My favorite thing about TYT, I would definitely say the family unit aspect. I mean, I genuinely really like working here. Can I curse at all? No. Okay.
Back on the Young Turks. Just one comment for you guys. We'll do two. Gabby Marita says, just imagine if there was a peace industrial complex. I mean, shouldn't that be a thing? Yeah, if there was money in it, but unfortunately there isn't. But there is money in war. Gerard Saw says, could you imagine Dems accusing one of these old white congressmen of treason? Heads would explode. Why don't they?
Yeah.
Why don't they? I mean, we do it all the time. Just, but there's a media blockade on progressives. So anyway, so Anna, I was at an event on Friday night, and a progressive came up and asked me about the Armenian genocide. And so I want to take this moment to clarify a couple of things, because even when progressives are asking me, I realize that a lot of the stuff online has spread too far and is wildly inaccurate. So I wanted to address a bunch of things. Some things have some kernel of truth, and others are wholly made up. I'm gonna get back to the Armenian genocide in a second, because that actually has a kernel of truth, but I want to address what my real opinions are today. So others that are flying around, you guys are owned by the government of Qatar. Okay, what is that based on? I believe it's based on, we once had a very small marketing partnership with AJ Plus, and they're connected to Al Jazeera, which is connected to Qatar. That kind of marketing relationship AJ Plus had with many different media organizations. So I guess NBC is now also owned by Qatar.
No, we're all owned by Qatar.
Yeah,
that's exactly what's happening.
So no, we are not owned by Qatar. We're not owned by Al Jazeera. We had a very normal marketing deal for a brief period of time. We have nothing to do with them otherwise. Soros funds the Young Turks. Totally made up, not remotely true, has never given us a dime. We were part of the media consortium. Apparently, they claim, and everything's lies, so that's probably not true either, but that some of the groups in the media consortium at some point got funding from George Soros. Well, we weren't one of those groups, and we never got any money from the media consortium. In fact, we paid dues into the media consortium.
We paid dues into that?
Yes, for a brief period of time. No, they're good people.
They are good people.
Yeah, they're good progressive outlets trying to do the right thing in the world. I don't know what their funding is, but it's not our funding, and it unfortunately didn't do a lot. I wish that we could have mobilized more and coordinated more within the progressive community, but it didn't happen. And certainly we got $0 and 0 cents from George Soros. In fact, Soros, I believe, I'm not positive about this, is against the convention to get money out of politics. And so I'm, in that sense, politically opposed to George Soros. Now I defend him against anti-Semitic tropes that the right wing does, where they call him a puppet master who's controlling all the progressives, including us. That's a very old anti-Semitic stereotype. It's not remotely true, and it's certainly not true in our case. Another one, this is mainly by establishment Democrats. The rest are almost all right wing. You guys are secretly Republican because you got money from the roamers.
Oh yeah. Our commentary makes it abundantly clear that we're secretly Republican. What? What?
Have you ever watched the show, even a minute of the show? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be true. They just have to say it. Now, did we get money from the roamers? We did. Okay, and that was public. Nobody hid that. It was a loan, which we repaid. So there was never any ideological component to it. Buddy Roemer is the former governor of Louisiana. He was a Republican, and he even ran for president as a Republican. There's only one thing that Buddy and I agree on politically, and that's how we met each other in the first place, which is to get money out of politics. So there are honest Republicans that care about that issue, and it's the most important issue. But we don't have to agree on anything else that had nothing to do with any part of the deal. It was just a simple business transaction. You know why? They know progressives are rational and hence good business people. So that we paid that back. It has nothing to do with anything anymore. Nobody controls us. That was never part of the original agreement. And now we have no connection at all. Okay, now let's get to the Armenian genocide. So did I write things about that when I was younger? Yes, so that part is true. So I did deny it earlier. I wrote in a column when I was in college about that, and so obviously a long time ago. Well, what's my position? I think I've stated it clearly a number of times, but I'm gonna state it one more time here, okay? The Armenian genocide happened. It existed, it's true, okay? I don't know how I could be any clearer than that. So I know that some Turkish folks grew up believing in things that were taught to them, whether it was in Turkey or through other means, and I know because I lived that, right? I'm a Turkish American, and I grew up believing the things that I was taught. Looking back on it, some of it is absolutely absurd. And there's Armenian genocide is an incredibly serious issue. I'm only saying this in the context of other things that I was taught in Turkey are now, you look back, are comical. So I remember that we were taught when I was in third grade, but apparently we had some history between first and third grade there. And I remember we were taught that the Turks had never lost a war other than World War I, because that one was a little hard to deny. And then later, when I read stuff about how Turks had lost many different wars, I was confused at first. Because when you get taught something when you're a kid, it is super hard to break, including religion, right? And so, of course Turks have lost wars, that's preposterous, right? And I remember we used to chant when I was a kid, Turkey's the biggest, there's no other country that's big. Preposterous, right? So that's the context in which I grew up. And so looking back at some of the stuff I wrote, there is an American colonel who said, for example, the Armenians returned fat and entirely unmassacred. Preposterous. When I read it at the time, I didn't have the context of being an adult like I am now, and that lasted far too long, by the way, my ignorance on the topic. And I couldn't understand what I know now. If I had read that now, I'd go, wait a minute, does he have an ulterior motive? So I don't know about that particular colonel, but I would be really surprised if he wasn't trying to get a contract with the Turkish government for something or other afterwards. Nobody returned unmassacred, let alone all the other things that he said. And to my Turkish friends who are deeply offended by all of this, and yes, and if you live in America, you say, oh, it's their fault and they're terrible, etc. But they're taught a certain thing, and so when they're challenged on this, they say, no, well, it was a civil war, it was, and it was just massacres. Really? That's what you're gonna say? No one denies that there were massacres. There was definitely terrible massacres. No one denies that the Armenians were driven out. So your big contention is, well, technically I don't want to call that a genocide. First of all, you're factually incorrect. Srebrenica is called a genocide. Only 8,000 people died there. I don't want to minimize that. It's terrible. In that case, it was Muslims that were targeted, but they were targeted because they were Muslim. Far more Armenians died in the Armenian genocide, and they were targeted because they were Armenians. Whatever excuse you want to make about why, they didn't target Norwegians, they didn't target other people. They targeted Armenians, they were driven out, they're not in Turkey now, and an enormous number died in massacres. It is a textbook definition of a genocide. And so the last thing that the Turks have to stand on is, well, then under that definition, then what happened to the Native Americans in America is a genocide. Yes, so what? Yes, it is. They were driven out, they were massacred. That's also what Christopher Columbus did as a genocide. That doesn't make what happened to the Armenians any better. So please, let's stop the excuses. It is a genocide, and let's acknowledge it and move on.
So I just have one thing to say about the Armenian genocide. First, for those of you who have been watching the show on a regular basis, you know that we've already addressed this, but I'm glad that we've addressed it again in a clear, concise way. Secondly, I just want to send a message to those who don't care about the Armenian genocide and have only used it and exploited it as a way to attack us and specifically attack me and spread lies about who we are and what we believe. What you're doing, and I'm talking about right-wingers in America, okay? What you're doing is spreading false rumors and complete character assassination that has led to serious threats against my life and serious threats against my family members' lives. I mean, it has gotten so serious. I live in Los Angeles, and unfortunately, if you don't respond to these false claims, well then the misinformation gets to the Armenian community. And I live in LA where there's a giant Armenian community, groups of people who think that I deny the genocide, which is one of the most absurd claims I've ever heard. And the threats against our lives, it's just so sick and so unnecessary, all for these cheap political, brownie points or hits or whatever the hell it is that the conservatives in America want. But one thing that I want to make clear is that had the Armenian genocide happened today and my family members were refugees seeking asylum here in the United States, these same conservatives who are pretending to care about the genocide would turn my family members away. They would call them immigrants, they would call them dangerous, and they would turn them around and tell them to go back to where they came from. So let's just be clear about who those people are. And those same conservatives are making excuses for the genocide that's happening in Yemen today. So I wasn't gonna comment much on this, but I think it is important to really focus on who the real terrible people are when it comes to this issue. And those are the ones who are exploiting it for their own political gain.
And Anna's dad is an Armenian from Syria. And so Syrian refugees would be blocked by the right wing at this current state. So let's just be honest about the things that happened and then and hopefully move on. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
All right, when we come back to domestic politics and
conservatives love socialism.
Fascinating. No, there is a real case to be made. Let's show you when we come back.
My Wells Fargo account.
I just divested funds from Wells Fargo.
I definitely urge you to do the same.
Please come divest. Water is life.
You're doing a show that's blowing the doors off everybody.
Young Turks is the largest online news network, not a big deal.
We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities.
We're so sick of this corruption.
We're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care.
Fourth day on Occupy Wall Street. Last night we launched Wolfpack.
It's us pushing our ideas out there, trying to help the country in every way that we can, trying to make this place just a little bit better.
Reporting from the Hillary-Bernie debate. I gotta be honest, you know what we do, we cover it for real.
For us, this system isn't working.
Free and fair elections.
And when he told the cops that day, when they came to drag her away, and he said, if you're gonna chain her, you're gonna chain me. Yeah. If you're gonna arrest her, you're gonna arrest me.
Hi, Aaron.
Hello, my name is Aaron Wysocki, and I'm the Director of Content Distribution for the Young Turks. So that means I deliver our product to market. We write all the titles and the descriptions and the tags for all the different platforms we're on. My team does, not just me. I started interning 10 years ago. I became a part-timer 9 years ago, and I became a full-timer 8 years ago.
How do you feel as a star of explained Facebook videos?
That's a lot of what I do for TYT, so it's pretty accurate. I would much rather be a behind-the-scenes guy that explains things to help Cenk get his message out, so I like him. The Vine reference makes me cringe a little bit because nobody remembers Vine.
Do you have a message for the members or something to tell to the members?
I mean, beyond thank you for supporting the Young Turks. You're more important than ever. Keep sending in your feedback because people definitely read them and look at them even if they don't get a chance to respond right away. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, please. What I see in the future for TYT, more of 2016. I think we're providing a voice that almost nobody in the media ecosystem is providing. So I think we're gonna continue to be the digital campfire for that particular side of the political spectrum.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful, arguably one of the top Democrats in the House. But there's someone finally challenging him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The election is today. If she wins, David beats Goliath.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
You made that happen. You're David. You just beat Goliath tonight. 2018 is a warm-up act. Wait till you get a load of 2020.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Cloyd says, it's a shame that you got to address these rumors, absurd. But you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, Cloyd, right? We didn't address them for a long time. And then they swirl and they swirl. And then you address them, well, you just made them bigger. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's why they do the smears. And so, look, I'll ask you guys for a favor. If you see it online, tell them the truth. And so, I mean, that's what we ask the TYT Army to do in a political context, to counter the trolls with reality and with facts. And so if you can, spread the word in that way when you see the trolls and the bots doing it to us.
And you guys should spread the word about good things too,
yes.
Like Aspiration. Aspiration is a wonderful financial institution. They will not invest your money in questionable industries. They will pay you 2% interest on your savings account, and they also will not charge you fees. So please check them out, aspiration.com/TYT.
Yeah, we're just trying to get your money into a place where you could have peace of mind and get good results. That's all. That's why they're our partner. All right, what's next?
All right. Frank Luntz is a GOP operative. And recently during an interview, he had some interesting things to say about Bernie Sanders and what the future holds for the Democratic Party. Take a look.
Frank Luntz found in an online survey of 1,000 people that 52% of Hillary Clinton voters agree with the statement, I prefer living in a socialist country to a capitalist one, compared to just 16% of Donald Trump voters. Asked about the AOC proposal to impose a 70% marginal tax rate on the top 1% of taxpayers, 79% of Clinton voters agree, and look at this, so do 46% of Trump voters. And veteran Republican pollster Frank Luntz joins us now. Before we get to more numbers, are the media kind of soft on socialism? By which I mean giving pretty favorable press to Democrats like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and while being pretty tough on the flaws of capitalism and the excesses of big corporations.
All you have to do is read the New York Times business section. Typically 7 stories, 6 of the 7 will be hostile to a corporation or hostile to capitalism as we know it. And in fact, it's gotten so bad that I've actually started to say to people, stop trying to defend capitalism. It's economic freedom.
You want to know what's economic freedom? Not having to worry about whether or not you can pay for a treatment you need to stay alive. That's economic freedom. Also, not having to worry about whether or not you can afford a roof under your head. That's economic freedom. I love how he's trying to rebrand capitalism because, yeah, there's been some pretty negative news coverage of these massive multinational corporations that in a lot of cases pay nothing in federal taxes. Amazon would be a good example of that. Amazon paid nothing in federal taxes in 2018, meaning that you and I paid more in federal taxes than the biggest, one of the biggest corporations in the country. It's insane.
The world has ever seen, in fact. I'm greatly amused by Howard Kurtz, who used to, by the way, be on CNN and Washington Post, saying, "Oh my God, the mainstream media, they're so hard on capitalism and they love socialism so much." I mean, these are the moments when I ask if we live on the same planet. Every time I turn on television, I see anchors on CNN. Now, I'm not talking about just Fox News. I'm talking about CNN, etc., yelling at some progressive. "Aren't you a socialist? Isn't it just like Cuba and Castro and Venezuela?" Where's the part where they like socialism? I've never seen that on television. Everything I've ever seen on television is one attack after another, without even defining what socialism means. Which goes to the next point about the poll. They're like, oh, even 46% of Trump voters want taxes raised for the top 1%, all the way up to 70% marginal tax rate, which AOC suggested. And you wanna know what the number is for all Americans? Here, I'm gonna go to graphic 28, okay? In a different poll, 76% of Americans believe the wealthiest Americans should pay higher taxes.
Boom.
3/4 of the country says the rich should pay higher taxes. By the way, is that socialism? No. We had a marginal tax rate of 70 all the way up to 91% in America under Dwight Eisenhower. I don't remember anybody calling Dwight Eisenhower a socialist or a communist, right? We had it under Kennedy, we had it under Johnson, we had it all the way through Reagan. We had those rates. So calling it socialism is wrong. And if you are calling it socialism, apparently the American people love it because 3/4 of them says yes. Raise taxes on the rich. And the reality is the only thing that's stopping it is the corruption. Because if you lived in a real democracy and 3/4 of the people wanted something, you'd have it. But we instead, not only do we not have it, we cut taxes on the rich. The exact opposite of what the American people wanted. Why? Because the media is controlled by people who are rich, by multi-billion-dollar corporations. And our politicians, through the donations, are controlled by billionaires, millionaires, and most importantly, corporations.
Now, in the next video, Luntz talks about his predictions for this upcoming election.
Half of Trump voters supporting AOC's 70% marginal tax rate. I mean, and you wouldn't know that from the coverage. You would think it's purely a left-wing position.
It's because the public is really frustrated about being forgotten or left behind. And those two emotions which elected Donald Trump are alive and well, not just on the right, but also on the left. It's the reason why Bernie Sanders did so well in 2016 and why, I'll be blunt with you, I think he's the most likely nominee in 2020.
Yes, so look, Frank Luntz is the top Republican pollster. In the postgame today, I'll tell you about how I applied to work for him when I came out of college.
What?
Remember back then I was a Republican.
God, you made a lot of mistakes when you were in college.
I did, man, lots of mistakes. Anyway, TYT.com/join to become a member and get the last half hour of the Young Turks where we talk about topics like that. But he's not dumb, okay? He might be Republican, we might not agree with him, but he's an awfully smart guy and he's been right about a lot of the issues, both in terms of framing that helps Republicans, but also from time to time giving them a heads up of the imminent danger. And in their case, yes, he's right. Bernie is the most likely to win. And because of that untapped anger, frustration, that is legitimate. It is legitimate. And so Luntz, again, is correct about this.
So the rest of his statement, though, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Luntz believes that it's a great thing for Trump and Republicans if Bernie Sanders wins the Democratic nomination.
No, see so he wears two hats, right? One is doing polling that helps Republicans either know the danger that's coming. Hey, it turns out there's finally a left wing that is gonna tap into that same resentment and frustration that the American people are feeling, that we've been using this entire time while we've been telling Democrats to run corporate friendly people because they're idiots and they'll listen to us, right? And then he wears a second hat, which is helping Republicans, because that's his job. He's a pollster that frames things to the advantage of Republicans. He's the one that came up with a lot of the terms you know now, like the death tax instead of the estate tax, etc. So when he says, oh, it'd be great if Bernie Sanders won the general election, he's wearing the second hat. Meanwhile, he's like, no. He said, no, we would have real trouble if it was Michael Bennet from Colorado. Michael Bennett's a total pro-corporate, pro-rich Democrat who would present no problem at all, just like Hillary Clinton in the general election. Luntz knows that. So he does the very common trick on Fox News. Oh, please don't pick Michael Bennet. That would be dangerous for Republicans. But Bernie Sanders, yeah, we would love to face him, even though he's gonna win, and it's like, he's super popular, even with Trump voters, even with Fox News viewers. So, but yeah, we think Michael Bennett's the real danger. Sure you do, sure you do. I guarantee you've asked Frank Luntz in a behind the scenes and he was being honest, he'd say, are you kidding me? We're gonna get our clock cleaned by Bernie Sanders. It'd be his dream to run against somebody like Michael Bennet. That poses no problems for him at all. He's like, that idiot bought into our talking points. He'll repeat the things I framed 20 years ago. And so will Klobuchar and so will all the establishment Democrats. By the way, so will Joe Biden.
So there are other conservatives, by the way, who are saying some favorable things about proposals coming from Bernie Sanders, AOC. So let's talk about that a little bit. Last week, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came together and released their proposal to combat some of the loan shark behavior that we're seeing. And interestingly enough, Tucker Carlson was supportive of this proposal. Take a look.
Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have a new proposal out. It's called the Loan Shark Prevention Act. Their bill would cap interest rates on credit cards at 15%. Well, for a lot of people, that would make a difference. The median interest rate on credit cards in this country right now is 21%, and some cards charge over 35%. Banks, meanwhile, can borrow money from the Federal Reserve at 3% interest. Do the math. It's a very good business. Now you know why they're always sending you those offers for new cards. They're getting rich from your debt. The bill would also apply the same 15% limit to consumer loans. It would ban, in effect, payday loans, those loans whose interest rates can exceed 500% or 600% every year. No doubt many Republicans in the Congress will oppose this bill, if only because of who sponsored it. Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are obviously demagogues. They don't mean half of what they say. The other half, they don't really understand. They're not impressive. But on this one issue, they are absolutely, indisputably right.
They're not impressive.
Yeah. So look, there's pressure on all sides to hate one another. And so I think Tucker Carlson has an interesting strand here. And we talked about it in our debate at Politicon, and I've talked about it on air before. And then people on our side yell at me and say, he's a white supremacist, don't say anything positive about him ever. But that's not how the real world works. So people are complicated and nuanced. What Tucker has figured out is that resentment in the Republican Party that helped Trump get elected is also aimed at big business. Now, he's being smart in pressing that raw nerve. Now, that is why he is now starting to be more popular in the ratings than even the other Fox News hosts. Now, does that mean he's right about all what he just said? Of course not. He says that they're demagogues and don't mean what they're talking about. What are you talking about? No, the reason you guys can't stand Bernie Sanders and AOC is because they do mean what they say. If you said that about establishment Democrats, if you said it about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, you'd be 100% right. They don't mean anything they say. But the reason you guys can't stand Bernie Sanders is because he definitely means it, and so does AOC. So that point that Tucker made makes no sense. He's just trying to do red meat for his audience. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I hate him, but they're right about this. And he said they don't understand their positions. What are you talking about? They have detailed policy positions that even your viewers agree with. So they absolutely do understand it. And he fundamentally misunderstands politics if he really means what he says. Because he says, oh, the Republicans oppose this because of who proposed it. Tucker, really, are you that ignorant about politics?
There's a little bit of truth to that, though.
No, there's no truth to that. No,
I mean Republican voters, that's what I'm specifically
Oh,
talking
Republican
about.
voters,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes. Republican voters, I would agree with you, and if that's what Tucker meant, I would agree with him. But if he means Republican politicians, no. No, Republican politicians oppose it because they get paid to oppose it. They're the most corrupt people in America, and Tucker, you know that. And so we're honest, we can tell you Nancy Pelosi raised a lot of money from people, from donors, and she serves those donors. But 99% of the Republican Party does that. They are far more corrupt than the Democratic Party. And even if you're not willing to acknowledge that, even though you're obviously wrong, you would have to admit that a huge percentage of them are corrupt. And the reason they protect the credit card companies and the big banks is because they get independent expenditures and campaign contributions from that.
Yes.
If you don't know that, then you don't know anything about politics.
In fact, I want to give you guys a very specific example. Mick Mulvaney. Mick Mulvaney was funded by the loan shark industry, specifically these payday lenders. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau had basically, they started enforcing some regulations against that industry, and they were also taking some of these payday lenders to court, pursuing lawsuits against them. And once Mick Mulvaney was the interim head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, you know what he did? He gave a bunch of favors and handouts to the industry and loosened restrictions toward that industry. And again, it's a perfect example of how you have a politician, he's corrupted and funded by a particular industry, and then once he has the power, he's able to do everything that that industry wants him to do. And in this case, it was the payday lenders and how much they wanted to loosen some of the restrictions and regulations that they were dealing with under the CFPB.
So the credit that I'll give Tucker Carlson is, he's the only one that understands the actual populist anger on the right wing side. So the rest of the Fox News anchors are paid to further the corruption in Washington. So they will back Republican Party officials who will sell you out, who work for the big banks and big business. Tucker has at least figured out that no, the Republican voters don't like big business and they don't like the big banks, and they get that those are the guys screwing them. So he has accurately assessed that and hence is being rewarded with higher ratings. Now, I don't know how long it's gonna last, because at some point, people come and talk to you and they say, whether you're on the left or the right, hey, take it easy with that kind of talk. Do you know who our advertisers are? So I don't know if that's gonna happen to Tucker Carlson, but he better watch himself, because if he starts to make too much sense, he will be taken off of Fox News. Even if he's loathsome on everything else, if he's right about the corruption, Fox News will not stand for it. They are the heart of corruption.
All right, we have about 4 minutes left, and we have to talk about Elizabeth Warren and Game of Thrones.
Go.
So warning to all of you who haven't seen the latest episode of Game of Thrones, this is gonna be a giant spoiler alert, okay? Let's get that out of the way. All right. Back in April, Elizabeth Warren had written a fun essay about Game of Thrones. So let me give you a few excerpts from it, and then I'll talk about why it didn't age well. She writes the following: Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen has been one of my favorite from the first moment she walked through fire. Despite being the daughter of the Mad King and the last rightful Targaryen heir to the Iron Throne until this week, Dany didn't grow up in the lavish palace walls of the Red Keep, right? So far so good, but let's give you some more of what she had written. Now again, I just wanna note, she wrote this on April 21st of this year. Dany believes fiercely in her right to rule, but she despises what ruling means in the world she's grown up in. She doesn't want to be a slave owner or a dictator, and she definitely doesn't want to become her murderous father.
Oops.
So, look, this is just a fun story. Obviously, she wrote this before the latest episode of Game of Thrones happened, but everything that happened in the latest episode of Game of Thrones debunks everything that Elizabeth Warren had written in this fun essay.
We got her. Okay, and Daenerys did a DNA test, and it turns out she is a Targaryen. Okay, so what's also funny now is people are like, "Oh yeah, well you stood by Daenerys." Okay, she didn't know. Oh yeah, you thought Ned Stark was gonna win. Really, no. We're having this conversation?
I don't think anyone is really criticizing her for this.
Really, the right wing?
Yeah, they'll criticize her for anything, but I I don't like the direction the show went in. I'm very upset about it.
Yeah, so look, we do Game of Thrones reviews right after the episode, so we'll do the one for the final episode on this Sunday. Just TYT.com is free to everybody, and then we do predictions, which are just for the members. But anyway, and Anna's gonna come back, but I, in the first season, or it might have been the second season, I did characters at TYT and who we are. I was Robert Baratheon and died immediately, but I have the gut, and so it made sense. And Anna was Daenerys. So back when it was cool to be Daenerys, you were Daenerys and Khaleesi and all that.
Not no more. Yeah, I mean,
and Elizabeth Warren. Well, look, it's Game of Thrones. You can't keep up with it.
Yeah, let me give you a little more of what she wrote. She, meaning Daenerys, states her mission clearly in season 7. I'm not here to murder.
Oops.
All I want to destroy is the wheel that has rolled over everyone, both rich and poor, to the benefit of no one but the Cersei Lannisters of the world. Okay, and as much as Dany wants to take on her family's enemies and take back the Iron Throne, she knows that she must first fight the army of the dead that threatens all mankind.
If there's one thing we can agree on, it's that Trump supporters are the White Walkers.
100%.
Okay. Now, funny enough, I made an analogy in a speech the other day about how the Young Turks online are the watchers on the wall, because these right-wing White Walkers are pouring all over social media, and the rest of the Democrats are totally clueless. And we're the only ones standing guard, going, "They're coming, they're coming." And now, of course, winter is here. Look, that's why if you watched our review, and you can still watch it online on YouTube and Facebook, I was also upset at the turn of Daenerys. I thought it was too quick on the show and too sudden and too unrealistic in that sense.
Super unrealistic. Can't we just have a heroine who doesn't fall under stereotypes in mass media?
I know, she was so good. I don't know, watch the review. Watch the whole thing, you'll get our sense. All right, guests coming up next.
Hey everybody, welcome to TYT Classics episode 3. I've been on 2 of these.
Why are you doing like a douchey CNN voice?
This has been fun. Good night, everybody.
All right, see ya.
Why do I have a giant smile on my face the whole time?
You're enjoying your life.
I'm so excited. I'm like, all right, so I really don't give about this.
I like to think that I'm a good person, but it's possible I've been a terrible person in the past, and I would like to earnestly go back and see if certain things I have said in the past have aged well.
This video where you decided to call your boss a dick on like your 4th day at work.
But see, this is exactly what TYT Classics is about.
Can I just remind you that he started this video saying he's worried that what he used to say would get him in trouble.
The great thing about this is I have no memory of it.
Of course.
None.
I barely remember how I got here. And as soon as I said intellectual courage, I thought, oh, that's good. And then literally 3 seconds later, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
But it's a good turn of phrase.
I didn't know what stress was back then. I really didn't. In fact, sometimes I would think to myself, Am I really getting paid for this?
Where the female is on the bottom and the penis one is on the top.
Do you want to try to say that again in a different way? So they're telling people, this is the punchline. Old lady's got something.
I can hear the stereotypes coming already.
Should I have said it?
No.
No.
You've come a long way.
Well, here we go.
When did you leave? When did you leave? Because those were good years. Just saying, you said the title, so you might get Alex Jones and have some things jumping up on your phone. No, I'm not looking at Grandma's spot. I'm not.
Pause. All right, we're back.
Jeez. Oh my God, the kiss I could stand, the sweaty palms.
I've never seen a thirstier man in my life.
Rick, this was fun.
I wish I could say the same.
There you go. That's how it's done.
Should we end it now?
I hope we already did.
Do all of you know the Young Turks?
An outlet like yourself that are willing to cover this story from the very beginning and that weren't afraid to say, hey, this is something that is legitimate.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
Brent Welder is a very progressive Democrat. He's a just Democrat, in fact, uncorrupted, not going to take big corporate PAC money. When did you start watching the show and when did you become a member?
So I've been watching for 10 years, an active viewer, but also more importantly, getting out there with causes like Wolfpack.
By the end of our campaign, we had organized about 22,000 individual contributions with an average about $27 a piece. And those initial people were a lot of TYT supporters as well.
In looking at the world in a very different way than corporate media does.
It takes those early people who believe that can really be the seeds of this movement, and that has been the Young Turks.
Thank you, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks.
Thank you to TYT and all the progressives around the country that have our backs.
You know, the first and only interviews that we had tonight to do with the Young Turks as well, because you guys have been here from the very beginning, and that's what this night is all about.
And I thank Cenk very much for the very good work that he does.
Thank you so much for all in this together, and the people are so powerful, and we're gonna get it done.
Thank you for your constant support.
It's a pleasure to be with rebels. I like that.
For all of the help that you've given to the Just Democrats, to Wolfpack, to help fellow progressives, thank you guys, to all the Young Turks members that make it possible. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
All right, back on the Young Turks. We got a great guest for you guys. Andy Z's in the studio. Good to have you with us again, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Andy, you got to bear with me. I got a cough. Okay. So Andy's a spokesperson for Revolution Books, and he also does refusefascism.org. But he's got a new project out. It's You Think You're Woke, but you're sleeping through a nightmare. The system cannot be reformed. It must be overthrown. Okay, so first, what does that mean?
Okay, well, the actual title is You're Sleepwalking Through a Nightmare. You think you're woke. What it means is that people are not actually acting commensurate with the fact that we face, on the one hand, a fascist regime. They're also not acting commensurate with the fact that we have a system that is literally destroying lives and destroying the planet. There's an existential question posed for the future of humanity with the environment. There's an existential question posed with, in fact, even the last week, Trump ratcheting up the situation with Iran. And this is a guy who said, if we have nukes, why can't we use it? These questions are posed. And this comes from a system that can't actually be reformed, where you have underlying problems like oppression of women, oppressed nationalities, black people, mass incarceration, the environment, these endless wars, and all of this, and the question of immigration, which is just this last week, he said, why can't we just shoot immigrants? Or he goaded his audience to say that. So in all of this, people are faced with two choices, and two choices in both regards. One, Are you going to go along with this regime, or are we going to act to drive it out? When will enough be enough with that? And two, in a more fundamental sense, how can you go along with a system that does this? There's another choice. It is possible to actually make a revolution, and we're starting to organize for that now, even as that's not immediately on the agenda.
So Andy, I want to get to how you're going to drive them out in a minute, okay. But you do talk about, I think, two distinct problems there, different problems, and I'm curious how you prioritize fighting them. One is the Trump-Pence regime, which I think Pence is actually more of a traditional Republican, so I'd say mainly the Trump regime, which is not necessarily part of this system. He is in a lot of ways. He does the tax cuts for the rich, et cetera, exacerbating income inequality, just like all Republicans do. But he's also does not believe in our system of government, period. I mean, he would end it in a second if he thought it was to his advantage and he could get away with it. And then you have the system itself, which, having talked with you before and what you've said here, you find to be oppressive. So which one's the bigger problem?
Well, the fundamental problem is the system itself. It's not just here, it's a worldwide system of capitalism, imperialism. It's a system that depends on exploiting people here and around the world and exploiting the planet as well. And where you have different blocks of corporations, capital, competing with each other within a country, and countries themselves competing with each other. And this has put us in tremendous peril, but they're very related. Trump is a product of the system, and so is Mike Pence, a representative of not only the system itself, you say a traditional Republican, but he's actually somebody who's a leading spokesperson for a movement that I would say is a Christian fascist movement that actually does want to and has been working for decades to transform the actual ruling consensus within this capitalist system in this country to a judicious, legally a Christian nation, even though that's been the history of it. But when you say what's the relationship between these problems? The foundation of this country is on slavery, the genocide of the native people, the theft of land, soon to become manifest destiny, and the conquering of this space, all the way ocean to ocean. The theft of Mexico, and then going into the 20th century, they're beginning to colonize countries around the world. So it is a system of which Trump is one peculiar and particular product of, that is actually trying to remake the operating norms of this society. He's actually doing that and succeeding this, and this is something that Pence himself is part of and is doing. That's the grand alliance between them. And so we face a fascist regime that's in the process of trying to consolidate fascism. But then there's the system itself that gave rise to this.
But Andy, so then wouldn't you want to depose George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan and arguably Bill Clinton, maybe even Barack Obama? So since they are all advocates of this system, and fairly enthusiastically so. So is there a distinction there?
Well, look, yeah, I would have liked to have seen a revolution years ago. Otherwise, when I started a revolution, I didn't have gray. I didn't start a revolution. When I got involved, I didn't have gray hair. I had hair all around to my back out of the 1960s, and met or heard a speech by and read the works of Bob Avakian, a revolutionary leader, and said, okay, there's actually, not only do I dislike what the US is doing in relationship to black people, Puerto Rican people, the island of Puerto Rico, what's also doing in Vietnam, and the whole culture of the madmen society I grew up in, but there's actually a way out of it. So yeah, I think we need a revolution. We've needed a revolution for a long time. That's a big and a tall order in a country like this, but now we actually do have a strategy to do that. We have a vision of a new society and a constitution for a new socialist republic. And we're starting on this tour to begin organizing people for the time when you could actually do that. We're trying to, at this point, just get a few thousand people together and organize into this, and to be propagating that there is another way the world could be. But what's most urgent right now, and not unrelated to revolution, is if we drive out this regime. If we don't, whether you believe, as you do and have articulated well, that through this system, and especially as you've put it, the reforming of this system, you could actually, that this is a way to change things. But for your interests and for what I think is fundamentally underneath this, the nature of this system, which could be and should be replaced with a better system, a radically different system, all of us have to unite to drive out this regime, and that is urgently on the agenda right now. But if the way we're going right now with people just accepting what's been done, listening to a speech where he's actually winking at and goading people to talk about shooting immigrants, then and to sit home. People say, they say this all the time, I don't believe that fascism can happen here. But by what you're not doing, you're actually showing how it actually could happen here.
So I'll get to deposing him in a second as well, but if you say fundamentally change the system, I know what it means when I say that. I talk about specific amendment to change the campaign financing because I believe that's the most important issue and affects others. But I don't think that you mean the same thing. I think you're talking about a more drastic overhaul. So how would you change it? Would you change it through amendments? Well, how would you change the system?
No, I mean, look, we do believe that ultimately it will come down to an actual revolution.
Like you mean a physical one?
A physical revolution. Ultimately, it will come down to, it's not something you just go off and start, it's something you prepare for. But if you look at let me pose this to you. If you look at how acute the contradictions are in society now, what do I mean by that? By the fact that the survival of humanity is at stake. You have 65 million refugees 2 years ago. This is going to expand dramatically. US military is preparing for such a thing, of people fleeing water shortage, food shortages. You have tremendous problems that are increasingly being solved through the hammer of this system and through millions of people being left aside, whether mass incarceration. Who would have thought 40 years ago you'd have 10 million people under the direct control at any given time of the so-called justice system? These contradictions could create the kind of crisis where people will be in a different situation, where the kinds of beginning sharp contradictions you see in the Senate right now, in the Congress right now, at the top of the ruling class, they'll become so acute that they don't get resolved easily, where reforms will not have worked, where people can't live in the old way. Then there will be a possibility of revolution if there's a force that's been organized. We're preparing now for that time, which I don't know when that's going to come, but we're also working on it.
So look, of course, we have a different point of view. So I hope my reforms work, so we don't have to get to your revolution. But if you had your physical revolution, which look, we've talked about it before, I don't support. Okay. Okay, what do you replace the Constitution? Do you replace the Constitution, and what do you replace it with?
Yeah, we have a far better Constitution. It is this Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America, which would offer people far more extensive rights than anything you have under this Constitution. Here's just one example from that Constitution. Under the kind of economy you would have then, an economy not for profit, that one of the three principles of the economy would be that every economic initiative taken, every productive capacity developed would have to be sustainable ecologically. You can't put that under capitalism, because under capitalism, such things as the environment and pollution are externalities to the calculations of profit at the corporate level, or even at the calculations.
I actually think I can put it in capitalism. That's the cost of their product, so they should pay the cost of their product. And so, but we don't make them because we have crony capitalism. But before we run out of time, how are you going to depose Trump?
Well, we think that I think for sure what needs to be done is that we have to get organized in such a way that thousands of people begin to take to the streets in cities around the country in protests that are not just a one-day thing, go home, make your statement, but are sustained protests that might begin first every week, and they would grow. Ultimately, millions of people, day after day, night after night, in nonviolent, sustained protest with one single demand, which is that the Trump-Pence regime must go. They both must go. And this is not some outrageous idea that nobody could ever think of. They did it in South Korea 2 years ago, Algeria last year, Armenia. This is all over the world, people are doing this, but it's only in America where people have been so deluded and misled, and particularly by the Democratic Party, who doesn't see and won't recognize what's actually happening. So you have a Nancy Pelosi saying Trump's not worth it. Well, it might not be worth it to her to impeach Trump, but to the people who are on the border, it's definitely worth it that people get organized to do this. So this is something that we think is both possible, doable, it's absolutely necessary. We should be, Cenk and Andy Z should be standing shoulder to shoulder in that. We can have an argument, which needs to be a big societal argument, between reform and revolution. Which is Which would be a better future? Which is necessary? Why won't one solve the problem? Or in your case, your argument with me is that what I'm doing might make it worse. Let's have that argument. I'd love to come back and continue that.
I like you fists up on that one.
Okay.
It's time to knuckle up. So look, the establishment thinks that I'm radical left. No. Andy's radical left.
Okay.
I'm just trying to reform the system so we can get back to democracy. But I love having the conversations. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. And
thank you, Andy. And everybody, refusefascism.org is the website. Go check that out.
And let me just mention revcom.us is to find out about the revolution.
Okay, so apparently that's afoot. So now you can find that out. When we come back, a little bit of a revolution in the state of New York. We'll explain.
Oh shoot! I need some fresh shirts. Okay. Let's see. New arrivals. What's new? This is amazing. What?
Thank you, user. I have now injected my code into Shop TYT. Proceeds from this shirt will benefit me directly.
When you were growing up, what did you want to be?
I think I was starting to think I don't want to do one thing, and I did live up to that.
Well, mission accomplished then, because Dave was a geologist.
Yeah.
And now he's, helped found the Young Turks. Even within TYT, you've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So if you want to do different things, you nailed it. All right, last story to end on is a Dave story. Whenever there was something like obvious, glaring, he would go up and ask them about it. Like it'd be like a giant church, right? And somebody's standing in front of it. The usual Dave go, pull up right in front of him. Be like, hey, do you know where there's a church around here? And they're like, right here. It's right here.
Practical jokes. Spice up life a little.
Welcome to Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. I'm Brett Ehrlich, and this is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. The Trump administration, Trump mandated Trump, that Trump, every Trump, other Trump, word Trump, be Trump, Trump.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to No Filter. Hey guys, welcome back to No Filter. Do you guys like that intro music? I hope you enjoyed that CSI-like intro music that brought you into the program today. I don't know how to describe it. It's the People's Court type of music. All right, with that said, let's get to the news. Last Thursday, an employee at the store called 911 to report that the men were trespassing because they hadn't purchased anything. What? That is one of the most insane arguments I've heard. Trump's administration would like to protect the big banks and assist them in screwing you over. We should have a government that protects us. Yeah, I'm putting you on blast. Now, with that said, I want to move on to another injustice in the country, and that has to do with CEO pay. Teachers in several red states are making headlines protesting the fact that their districts have been severely underfunded. They haven't received raises in years, sometimes decades. Damn, keeping it 100.
Now, top. No.
My name is Cassandra Hanks. I've been with TYT for 3 years. I am a video editor and a photographer. A main perk for working for TYT is, as being their main photographer, I get to photograph and sometimes meet some of the celebrities that come through. Susan Sarandon was amazing because she brought her dog Penny. Tom Morello is probably my favorite because I love rock music. Meeting people like Joss Whedon and Quentin Tarantino has been some of the reasons why I got into filmmaking and photography was like a dream come true.
back on the Young Turks. We've got another great guest for you guys as usual. Joining me now is Patrick Nelson. He is on the NYS Democratic Committee for Saratoga County, 113th Assembly District. He also ran for Congress as a Justice Democrat in New York and wants to talk about how undemocratic the voting is in the state of New York. Patrick, welcome back to the Young Turks. How you doing?
Cenk, it's a great honor to be back. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having me on short notice with this deadline that we're bearing down on right now.
Yeah, no problem. So what's the deadline, Patrick?
So on May 22nd, the State Democratic Committee is going to convene in Albany, New York, and is going to decide the rules for the 2020 New York State Democratic primary, which is slated for April 28th. Now, Chairman Jay Jacobs is putting together this plan to ensure that New York has the second most delegates of any state in the contest, and we come at the end of April. So if you forgive the sports metaphor, Iowa and New Hampshire are the regular season. After Super Tuesday, we get into the playoffs, and New York might very well be the Super Bowl of this whole thing that decides the final nominee. So that's the stakes that we're looking at right now. So we're slated to have the second most delegates, second only to California. But New York, while we're reforming our election laws, we've got early voting now for the first time this year. We still have the longest by far deadline to join a party or change your enrollment, which can be as short as 6 months in terms of presidential primaries and as long as 11 months to the day for a state Democratic or Republican primary in, say, September. So what we're trying to do, go ahead, Cenk.
That seems crazy. They don't block voting like that even in Alabama or Georgia, the most red states that you could imagine. If you can't switch parties until, like, if you have to make up your mind 11 months before an election, well, you're not even going to be thinking about that election. It's not even going to be on your radar in any way, shape, or form. So you don't know whether you like the candidate that you'd like to switch to vote in that election. Is this the most restrictive law in the whole country?
Yes, we are 50 out of 50 in terms of states. And as a friend of mine who's an organizer in Glens Falls likes to say, we're the weird ones. You, me, the people that do this stuff in the off season, you hear it ahead of time. Most people are working their jobs, they're taking care of their family, and they might start paying attention when Iowa and New Hampshire happens. They find a candidate they like, if it's Beto or Bernie or Biden or anybody else that's running with a B name. And they decide they want to join the Democratic Party. Whoops, you had to do it on October 11th of the previous year. So that opportunity has passed. And then we as Democrats miss the opportunity to grow our party through the primary because people might want to join up and go, this candidate speaks to me. I want to join the Democratic Party. Whoops, too late, sorry, can't come in. How are we supposed to grow our party? How are we supposed to, especially in places like mine? I'm in a rural district, a red area. We need more Democrats in so that we can get rid of corporate Wall Street sellouts and have actual representation.
So before we get to what you can do about it, why do they do this system? What's the point of being that restrictive?
So I think the argument was that they don't want what's called party raiding to happen. Which is basically where somebody like connives to go into a primary and vote for the least electable person, as if we can decide who's electable or not, right? If you were going to raid a primary in 1992, you would have supported Bill Clinton, who wound up being the president. If you were to raid a primary in 2016, you might have supported Donald Trump, and how well did that work out? So this doesn't really happen that well. So I think that's the justification for it. But ultimately, if you look at the research, this isn't a thing that happens at any level. And it seems to happen regardless of what the regime is, whether you're an open primary, a closed primary, a long deadline, or short deadline, the incidence of party raiding is pretty uniform across all states. So even if it were a problem, which there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that it was, this doesn't solve it. All it does is disenfranchise genuine voters who might want to join a party. So, and it's on the state party to make this decision because the ultimate authority actually on who's allowed to vote in a primary because of Supreme Court precedent rests with the party, not with the legislature. The party is empowered to expand the class of people that can vote within its primary. And we're being required to actually under DNC rules. Like we're so bad that the DNC has basically gone, New York, stop screwing around. This is ridiculous. You're suppressing voters. And so in their rules, they want it to be same day. On election day, you should be able to change your party or join a party. We can't do that under the New York Constitution, but we're at least trying to get it so that the voter registration deadline And the deadline to join a party are the same day, like most people already think they are, and then they only find out after the fact that that registration won't go through for another 12 months.
So Patrick, I have a hunch that part of the reason why the voting might be so restrictive is not because they're concerned about Republicans coming to vote in the Democratic primaries, but because they're concerned about protecting incumbents. And if you have less voter participation in primaries, you'll protect incumbents better.
Would politicians craft the rules to better serve their maintaining of power? Is that a thing that happens in American politics?
No, well, I'm sure it would never happen. It's certainly not in the Democratic Party.
No.
Well, let's talk about the solution. What can people do about it?
So we need folks to go to letalldems.vote.org, LETALLDEMSVOTE.org, and there's a public comment period that's happening right now until May 18th, where registered Democrats in the state of New York, so those of you out there, please go do this right now, can submit a public comment, becomes part of the record, becomes persuasive when we get to that Albany meeting. If you want to go a step further, and I encourage you to do this because your state committee reps, of which I am one, don't hear from you enough. Right? They're elected to represent you, but when's the last time you talked to them? Do you know who they are? Because they're supposed to represent you. So sign up. We'll help you get in touch with your state party rep and let them know your viewpoint on this and get you involved in the party process, because we got to shine a light on this. Important decisions happen at the party level, and we got to get folks involved in that decision-making process. So you can put a public comment in, sign up to help us whip votes, share this on social media. We've got a very short window, but we think we can get it done. We've got a coalition of progressives, of moderates, of more conservative Democrats who all believe in democracy. We need to expand that with the votes and get this done. And also, if we don't get it done, we might lose delegates, right? The DNC could take away delegates from New York, or they could force, this is crazy, Cenk. They have the power to force the state party in New York to run a privately funded primary, not allowing the taxpayers to fund it. We would have to put it on ourselves to make it comport with the DNC rules. And that could cost $10 million or more, which even if we had it in the Democratic Party, we should be spending that money beating Republicans, not on, suppressing voters because we don't want to change the rules.
So if people go to that website, you said, it's tough to get it done, but you think you can. What is it that they do that makes a difference in quote unquote getting it done? What does getting it done mean?
Okay, there's a required public comment period for the delegate selection rules. So anybody in the state of New York, any Democrat can put their comment into the record that goes in a list that goes to the DNC. We on the committee can see it, so we can say, hey, listen, there's 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 comments here. Almost all of them are New York Democrats saying they want to get this done. That's an onus on us. And then they can also, this is even better, sign up. We'll put them in touch with their representatives. Just like you call a member of the legislature or you call a congressperson, you can email or call your state party rep and say, hello, representative, I'm so-and-so, I'm a Democrat in your district, and I'm concerned about the Let All Democrats Vote amendment. I want you to support it, and I'm going to be watching to make sure you do that because this is what Democrats in the state of New York want. So this is a lobbying effort.
I got you. And what happens on May 22nd?
We vote. There'll be a debate on the floor. We'll go back and forth. This is actually the first meeting where there's going to be a formal recorded vote by electronic device. So everybody can be held accountable for how they vote. So if your rep doesn't vote the way you want, you can find out. And then, so we treat it like a legislature. We get this resolution passed. And if the resolution is passed, we guarantees that if you register as a Democrat up to 25 days before the April 28th primary, you can vote in that primary. But ultimately, it's an incentive for the legislature and the governor to change this legislatively so it applies to all parties in all primaries. But we as a Democratic Party can at least fix it so that the New York State Democratic Party isn't participating in voter suppression, even if the state law of New York suppresses voters. We can opt out of that voter suppression as a party, and we need to do that.
So Patrick, we talked about Democratic and Republican parties, but New York's a little bit more complicated than that. First of all states are more complicated because a lot of people register as independents. But then in New York, you also have the Working Families Party. So what happened if you're registered in Working Families Party or as an independent? Does that mean even though you might be really progressive, maybe even more progressive than the average Democrat, that you're not allowed to vote for Democrats?
No, New York would remain a closed primary. I know a lot of people don't support that. We don't think we have the votes in the state committee. Actually, I know we don't have the votes in the state committee to do something otherwise. But if you declare that you're a Democrat, you'll be eligible to vote. and you'll be eligible to vote in a reasonable window. But if you stay in the Working Families Party, you're going to vote in the Working Families Party primary. If you're an unaffiliated voter, right, you don't have a party, you're not going to be able to vote in a primary still. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but
Patrick,
that's kind of where we're at.
What you're proposing is, hey, if people change their mind and they want to be a Democrat, we should give them an opportunity to do that and not foreclose it at 6 months or 11 months before an election.
Let's have it at a reasonable period of time, because most people vote for the candidate. They don't vote for the party. So if there's a Democratic candidate that inspires you, you're watching the debates and you want to get involved and it's March, you still have time to join the Democratic Party before April 28th comes along, and you can make your voice heard. And we as Democrats can welcome you in with open arms, and you can become part of the progressive party that we're trying to build here in New York, that we are building here in New York.
So one last thing, Patrick, I just, because it's so absurd, I just want to make sure that I've got this right. And I want the audience to make sure it's got it right. So the Democratic Party in New York says, unless you know 11 months ahead of time, in some circumstances, we're not going to let you into the Democratic Party. We don't want you as a Democrat. We're not going to let you vote in the Democratic primaries.
That's the law is set up that basically your change of party doesn't happen until after the next general election. So if you file it today, it becomes effective on November 5th. If you file it on October 11th, it becomes effective on November 5th. Basically, you have to decide you want to change parties a year ahead of time, before most candidates have announced, before most campaigns have started, before you have the opportunity to be inspired by some of the great candidates that we think we run here in the New York State Democratic Party, like, I don't know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for instance. You know, if you're inspired by somebody that's doing such great work, you know, you don't have the opportunity to join the party and support that candidate. And we want to use these great candidates. We've got 22 of them running for president. Every one of them is better than Trump. And if you're inspired by any one of them, come join the New York State Democratic Party and support the candidate that you want, and then we can unite the party and defeat Donald Trump.
Okay, Democratic Party, it shouldn't be complicated.
No, it should be democratic, right?
Yeah, it should be democratic, and you should want people in your party. LetAllDemsVote.org. Patrick Nelson, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chang.
Problem. Comes the cough again. Okay, post game when we return.